Chapter 2837. Du Xiaofu felt a little dejected. It was too difficult to reach the immortal realm. Countless people who cultivated only one type of primordial law found it difficult to reach the immortal realm, let alone someone who cultivated all four types of primordial laws. At this moment, he only felt that his future was boundless, and he had no direction at all. At this moment, he actually had the urge to shake the dean awake and ask him how he managed to break through to the immortal realm using the two primordial laws of time and space. That way, he would be able to use it as a reference. However, it was obvious that this idea was not realistic at all. He did not understand what the meditative realm was like. If he disturbed the dean's breakthrough, it would not be a good thing. Not to mention whether it would affect the dean's cultivation. If he woke up, he would probably be able to slap Du Xiaofu into a pancake. If the dean wanted to kill him in the meditative realm, wouldn't it be as easy as killing an ant? Therefore, Du Xiaofu could only shake his head and give up. Looks like I can only rely on myself to figure it out slowly. He stopped thinking about it, stood up from the ground, and walked out of the ancient desolate space. He could not rush to break through to the immortal realm. Swoosh! Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in the outside world. He came to the ancient forest that was razed to the ground by the ferocious creature. Emperor God! Your Majesty! Seeing him appear, the 20,000-strong people of Yuqing rushed forward and surrounded Du Xiaofu. This breakthrough actually took me nearly 2 years. Du Xiaofu counted the days and discovered that from the time they obtained the black blood evil Zoisha until now, almost 2 years had passed in the outside world, and in the desolate ancient space, it was almost 200 years from start to finish. However, he had also gained a lot, especially in the time and soul laws. He had finally improved greatly. All four types of primordial laws had reached the full circle of truth-severing stage. If such a terrifying development were to be announced throughout the 33 heavens, it was unknown just how many people would be frightened to death. The Divine Emperor's aura has become even more profound. Now, he wouldn't even be afraid of the top 100 Changrong Sky cultivators, let alone the top 100 of the Yuqing Divine Nation. Meng Dongyang sighed bitterly and said with some helplessness. The four primal laws had all reached the great circle of truth-severing. This kind of terrifying realm was enough to crush the combined attacks of many of his peers. Their deity emperors had already left their peers in the dust by a terrifying distance. The others listened to Meng Dongyang's words and just nodded silently in agreement. I wonder how the major forces in the Fiend God battlefield are doing. We've been delayed for so long. We've missed a lot of opportunities. Du Xiaofu didn't care about the gazes of the crowd as he sighed with emotion. Since His Majesty has come out of seclusion, let's continue our exploration, a late-stage truth-severing expert said as he looked at Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu gladly agreed. Then, he led everyone and continued forward. At this time, they were in an area that looked like a plain. This was caused by the ferocious creature from before. The ferocious aura was much thinner than elsewhere. As they continued on their journey, Du Xiaofu put all the cultivators below the late stage of truth-severing back into the desolate ancient space again. Then, he began to travel through the void with Yiqing Yan and a dozen others. As they traveled through the ancient withered forest, they realized that there were many traces of people exploring this place. I think the disciples of the other major forces must have discovered this place and come in to search for it, Yu Qingyao said as she looked at the surroundings. 2 years was enough time for many things to happen. It wasn't surprising that more experts had discovered this place. Since that's the case, there's no need for us to look for any more benefits here. Let's continue to the desolate ancient ruins. Zhang Haoren nodded and then looked at Du Xiaofu. Even if there were other benefits in this forest, they must have been plundered by the disciples of the other major forces. There was no need for the Yuqing Divine Nation to waste any more time here. Let's go! Du Xiaofu waved his hand and led the group in the direction they had set. Along the way, their speed was extremely fast and there wasn't much delay. According to the memories of the demon clan member, the desolate ancient ruins were very far away from them. With the strength of an ordinary truth-severing cultivator, they would need to fly for at least a few years to reach it. Therefore, the group moved with almost all their strength. However, during this period, Du Xiaofu and the others would often appear from the void passageway and obtain some treasures and such. They had a good harvest. The deeper they went into the fiend god battlefield, the thicker the bloody and ferocious aura. The things that were born were also more extraordinary. However, they didn't find any treasures on the level of the black blood Ganoderma and the blood jade spirit ginseng. However, they had a great harvest of things like the black soulwood and the underworld soul grass. They actually obtained 30 stalks. Things on the level of the crimson nether flower were even more numerous. Such a harvest was absolutely beyond the imagination of many young experts. It was enough for many people to share. On this day, Du Xiaofu and the others were flying and hurrying when they encountered a very large group of people. There were hundreds of thousands of people. Disciples of the Holy Land. The moment he saw this group, Du Xiaofu concluded that they were definitely from a holy land. Large numbers of disciples from those extremely powerful holy lands had entered this place. He had already seen them before the fiend god battlefield opened. Just as he was speaking, the other party had also discovered them and was flying towards them. Many young faces appeared. There were 7 people in the lead, all of whom had the strength of truth-severing consummation. They were very terrifying. In fact, there was a young man in white robes who was even more unfathomable. Even Meng Dongyang, Zhang Haoren, and Ting Yuanshan, the 3 truth-severing consummation cultivators, couldn't see his true realm. They seemed to be from the Qingtsang Holy Land. Yu Qingyan's eyes flashed as he looked at the white-robed young man in the lead and said, when they gathered outside the fiend god battlefield, he had paid attention to the situation of some holy lands and felt a sense of familiarity with this young man. The Qingtsang Holy Land could be ranked in the top 10 of the 35 holy lands in the entire transcendent Changrong heaven. It was definitely a colossus. Which holy kingdom's disciples are you all from? When he saw Du Xiaofu and the others, the white-robed young man stepped forward and asked softly. His gaze swept across Du Xiaofu and the others one by one, and there was deep shock in his eyes. The purple-robed young man and the others only had about 20,000 people, but there were 4 truth-severing consummation cultivators among them. This was especially so for the purple-robed young man. Even the white-robed young man felt as if he had fallen into an abyss when he looked at him. This feeling made him afraid. It was also because of this that he would greet the other party now. That's right. We are disciples of the Yuqing Holy Kingdom. May I ask if you are the saint of the Qingtsang Holy Land? Yu Qingyan looked at Du Xiaofu. After receiving his instructions, he cupped his fists and said to the white-robed young man opposite him, Yuqing Holy Kingdom! It's actually someone from the Yuqing Holy Kingdom! When the hundreds of thousands of people opposite them heard this, they were all stunned. The name of the Yuqing Holy Kingdom could be said to be like thunder to their ears. 2 years ago, they had caused quite a commotion. In the beginning, the people of the Tsungming Holy Kingdom were ruthlessly trampled on by the newly appointed Yuqing Divine Emperor. Later on, it was rumored that more than 20 experts of the Jade Feather Holy Ground had also suffered greatly at the hands of these people. Therefore, in an instant, the name of the Yuqing Holy Kingdom spread throughout the entire Divine Devil battlefield. Their young Divine Emperor, who was only at the truth-severing stage, also became famous. All the saints, saintesses, and princesses were deeply interested in him. So it's you from the Yuqing Holy Kingdom. I am Xiaoyun, from the Qingtsang Holy Land. The white-robed young man looked at Yu Qingyan and the others opposite him and replied very politely. His eyes finally landed on Du Xiaofu. It wasn't difficult for him to see that this young man in purple robes was undoubtedly the legendary Yuqing Divine Emperor. Before the destruction of the Extreme Spirit Holy Land, the Yuqing Holy Kingdom could only be ranked in the middle of the 72 holy kingdoms. But now, it seems that the strength of their generation is very terrifying. Xiaoyun thought in his heart. He didn't dare to believe it. The overall strength of the Yuqing Holy Kingdom made him look at them in a new light. This wasn't a lineup that a mid-tier holy kingdom should have. This one is Du Xiaofu. Greetings, Saint Sun! Du Xiaofu finally spoke. Clearly, the other party didn't have much hostility, so he didn't put on airs. Greetings, Divine Emperor! Xiaoyun smiled and said to him. I didn't expect to see the Yuqing Divine Emperor here. It is indeed a surprise. It just so happens that a secret place called the Primordial Ruins has appeared. Right now, all the holy lands and holy kingdoms are rushing there. If the Divine Emperor is interested, why don't we travel together? He looked at Du Xiaofu and spoke calmly. His attitude was also somewhat sincere. Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows and was slightly surprised. He had learned about the existence of the primordial ruins from the memories of the demon race. He didn't expect that in just 2 years, it had already spread throughout the divine demon battlefield. Many people knew about it. This made him a little speechless. It seemed that many things had happened while he was in seclusion. He guessed that the other forces had also encountered the demon race. All right. After thinking for a moment, Du Xiaofu nodded his head and simply agreed. It just so happened that he was going there. It was also on the way to the Qingtsang holy ground. He could also find out some things and understand the current situation better. Then let's talk as we walk. Xiaoyun smiled warmly and gestured for him to go ahead. Du Xiaofu also stretched out his hand, and the two of them walked side by side. They led the majestic crowd of over 100,000 people and flew deeper into the divine demon battlefield. Du Xiaofu and Xiaoyun chatted as they traveled. Before long, they became much more familiar with each other and began to call each other brothers. Brother Xiaoyun, there's something I don't understand. Du Xiaofu glanced at Xiaoyun and asked. 2 years ago, I heard that many disciples from the 35 holy lands and the other 71 holy kingdoms wanted to cause trouble for me. But why do you want to travel with me? Aren't you afraid of being implicated? He was a little puzzled. He didn't know Xiaoyun, but he suddenly wanted to travel with the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. This puzzled him. Haha! Xiaoyun suddenly laughed heartily when he heard Du Xiaofu's words. He said in an extremely candid manner, Reputation is something that is spread. Moreover, anyone with a discerning eye can tell that someone is intentionally spreading rumors about you, Brother Du, to make you the target of everyone. He glanced at Du Xiaofu and continued. However, this plot that can't be considered a plot is very successful. Even if many people see the truth, they still list you as their number one enemy and want to fight you. They want to trample on your name and establish their own prestige. Brother Xiaoyun, you see it clearly. Du Xiaofu nodded and expressed his agreement with Xiaoyun's words. Actually, I'm no exception. My thoughts are exactly the same as theirs. I want to defeat you in battle. Xiaoyun smiled faintly. There was a hint of ridicule in his eyes, but it suddenly turned into deep helplessness as he said, However, when I first saw you, I realized that your cultivation is too terrifying. You're definitely much stronger than me. So, at that moment, I completely dispelled my previous thoughts. Du Xiaofu raised his eyes to look at Xiaoyun. He was very surprised. There was no need to think about it. This guy was also very terrifying. Otherwise, how could he have seen through his cultivation with a single glance? Although Xiaoyun's words were very modest, and he knew he wasn't Du Xiaofu's match, Du Xiaofu also knew that if Du Xiaofu excluded himself, Xiaoyun would be one of the strongest even amongst his peers in the 33 heavens. At the same time, Du Xiaofu had a good impression of this person. He was very frank and didn't hide anything. He said what he thought. At the very least, he seemed like a magnanimous gentleman at the moment. When a terrifying expert knows he's no match for you, he definitely can't be your enemy. How can it be better to be your friend? Xiaoyun didn't care about Du Xiaofu's gaze and continued to say, However, the disciples from the 35 holy lands are all arrogant people. I'm no exception. So, I hope to have a battle with you if I have the chance. I don't want to defeat you, but at the very least, I want to measure the extent of my strength. Brother Xiaoyun is too modest. We'll definitely have a chance to fight. I hope we can fight to our heart's content. Du Xiaofu revealed a helpless smile, but he agreed very straightforwardly. Ha ha, good! Xiao Yun laughed again and said, I'm not afraid of losing to you. The greatest benefit of being a friend is that at the very least, I won't be beaten up miserably like an enemy and be mocked by others. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu rubbed his nose, speechless. According to Xiao Yun, there were such benefits to being friends. He hadn't realized it before. This guy is definitely a terrifying master. Du Xiaofu looked at Xiao Yun again and thought to himself. Xiao Yun wanted to use him to see the extent of his strength. In fact, he was implying that it would be difficult for him to find an opponent in the same generation as him in the Changrong Divine Land. He wanted to fight with all his strength. However, Du Xiaofu thought to himself and chuckled. When the time comes, I'll definitely teach you a lesson. If you're not convinced, you can bring more helpers and come at me together. Hundreds of thousands of people traveled at an extremely fast speed. Their destination was the primordial ruins. Along the way, they encountered another group of people. There were about 30,000 of them, and they were also very strong. However, compared to the combined forces of the Qing Tsang Divine Kingdom and the Yuqing Divine Kingdom, they were clearly lacking. Fatty Fan Yushu recognized the identity of these people. They were from a faction called the Changqing Divine Kingdom, ranked 7th or 8th among the 72 Divine Kingdoms. When the disciples of the Changqing Divine Kingdom saw Du Xiaofu's large group, they directly took a detour and didn't even dare to greet them. The difference between a sacred ground and a divine kingdom was too great. Few people dared to provoke them. Traveling with the people of the Qing Tsang Divine Kingdom actually has such benefits. Du Xiaofu rubbed his nose and thought to himself. With such a terrifying lineup like the Qing Tsang Divine Kingdom, it could save him a lot of trouble. Otherwise, if he encountered other factions along the way and they knew his identity, it would inevitably attract some trouble. Fortunately, these troubles were avoided because of the deterrence of the Qing Tsang Divine Kingdom. After rushing for so long, we should be arriving soon. Among the crowd, a true severing perfection stage expert from the Qing Tsang Divine Kingdom sighed as he looked around. Based on his feeling, they shouldn't be too far away from the primordial ruins. The divine demon battle realm is too vast. We've been gone for another 2 years. Some experts revealed bitter smiles. They were very helpless. True severing perfection stage experts rarely use spatial channels to travel such a long distance. It was indeed a waste of time for them to travel such a long distance. However, in these 2 years, they had gained a lot. There were many precious medicines here. Hundreds of thousands of people spread out like a large net. Who knew how many benefits they had obtained? At this point in time, almost everyone had obtained extraordinary opportunities and reaped bountiful rewards. Perhaps to the few experts like Du Xiaofu and Xiao Yun, these benefits weren't particularly great. However, in the eyes of others, it was something unimaginable in the past. Do you feel it? The fiendish aura here is much stronger. I'm afraid the primordial ruins aren't far away. Xiao Yun suddenly stopped flying and carefully sensed the aura in the void. I feel that my divine soul is throbbing more and more. It seems like I can't suppress it any longer. An early stage true severing perfection stage expert frowned and said, At this time, a large number of seizing divinity stage experts had a deeper understanding of this. They circulated their cultivation with all their strength, but they slowly felt that their expressions were a little erratic. It should be soon. The air and soil here are completely different from other places. The difference is huge. Du Xiaofu looked at the ground from high up in the sky and said softly. Many people followed his gaze. The soil on the ground was also dark red, but it was no longer dry and hard. Instead, it was like a bloody mud. Patches of paste flowed, looking very terrifying. Chapter 2838. Everyone felt that this was a phenomenon that would only appear when they got close to the desolate ancient ruins. When the heavens and earth were first created, a bloody battle had definitely occurred there, soaking the soil here into mud. Continue forward! Xiao Yun waved his hand and moved at the same time as Du Xiaofu, continuing to advance deeper into the ruins. Du Xiaofu had learned from the memories of the demon elites earlier that the desolate ancient ruins were indeed not very far from here. However, this was only relatively speaking. According to everyone's previous speed, they would need about half a year to truly arrive. As everyone continued to advance, the bloody mud on the ground could no longer be seen. Instead, it was replaced by rolling black waves, like an ocean, surging with monstrous waves. This was a scene formed by the passage of countless years of blood. It had not dried up and was still flowing, forming a sea of blood. The scene was terrifying. And it was at this time that someone finally could not bear it anymore. Their bodies began to fester, corroded by the bloody murderous aura. This is too terrifying. This kind of place is not something normal people can come to at all. Some early-stage true severing cultivators also said. The surrounding air was filled with scarlet, carrying with it an incomparably terrifying power that constantly attacked their physical bodies and primordial spirits. I feel like I can no longer fly, an elite said in shock. His entire body swayed in the void, as if he was about to fall. At this time, everyone's strength was constantly flowing away, suffering a great erosion. Vaguely, there was also a strange power dragging them downwards, as if it wanted to pull everyone into the sea of blood. There's someone up ahead! Yu Qingyan pointed. Following the direction of his finger, there was a group of figures in the distance. They were also the disciples of a faction. Du Xiaofu and the others had long since discovered this scene. Under their observation, they saw a terrifying scene. Several miserable screams came from the distance. Several figures fell from the sky one after another, directly falling into the sea of blood. Those people struggled with all their might, but the more they struggled, the more their bodies sank. In less than 2 breaths of time, everyone saw that those people's bodies quickly melted, directly turning into pools of black blood that merged into the sea of blood. This. On Du Xiaofu's side, many people felt their scalps go numb and goosebumps appear all over their bodies. It was a terrifying sight to behold. All of these people were seasoned gods, and were clearly very strong. However, they were unable to escape from the sea of blood and died instantly. Be careful! At this moment, Zhang Haoren shouted loudly and quickly waved a ray of light, pulling Yu Qingliang, He Jibai, and the others over to him. Just now, beneath their feet, a sea of blood came crashing down, almost engulfing them. That was close! He Jibai, Yu Qingliang, and the others were filled with lingering fear. If Zhang Haoren hadn't acted in time, they would have followed in the footsteps of those young disciples. Those below the late stage of truth severing stage, retreat. There is no benefit in advancing any further. Just wait for us outside. Xiao Yun turned around to look at the hundreds of thousands of people. Among these people, there weren't many who had truly reached the late stage of truth severing. The Yuqing Divine Kingdom had more than 10 people, while the Qing Tsung Holy Ground had more than 500 people. Many of the weaker people couldn't advance any further. If they continued, it would be no different from courting death. I feel that the deeper we go into the sea of blood, the more dangerous it will be. I'm afraid that even those at the peak of truth severing stage may not be able to persevere until the end. Du Xiaofu thought for a moment, then said to Xiao Yun, why don't we continue forward and do our best to scout it out? Those below the peak of truth severing stage, retreat. He frowned slightly. He felt that this sea of blood was definitely not ordinary. Even if he was at the peak of truth severing stage, he probably wouldn't be able to go very deep. Rather than having these people follow him pointlessly, it was better to have them wait outside. In fact, he had also considered another possibility, which was that many other forces knew about this place and were gathering here. If the people from the Qing Tsang Holy Ground and Yuqing Divine Kingdom encountered them and started fighting, it would be safer to have more experts with them. All right. Then it's decided. Xiao Yun nodded in agreement. I'll have to trouble everyone to take care of the people from the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. Du Xiaofu turned around, cupped his fists, and said solemnly to the hundreds of thousands of people from the Qing Tsang Holy Ground. The divine demon battle realm was filled with danger. It came from the remnants of the demon race, from the battles between the various forces, and so on. He didn't want anything to happen to Yu Qingyan, Yu Qingyao, He Jibai, and the others when he wasn't present. Rest assured, Divine Emperor. In the Divine Demon Battle Realm, there aren't many forces that dare to provoke our Qing Tsang Holy Ground. Even the Huan Chu Holy Ground, Truyan Holy Ground, and other forces have to give us some face. A late-stage truth-severing stage cultivator laughed heartily and said to Du Xiaofu, "Brother Du, don't worry." Xiao Yun also gave some instructions to the people from the Qing Tsang Holy Ground, then had everyone retreat. In this way, only Du Xiaofu, Xiao Yun, Teng Yuanshan, Meng Dongyang, Zhang Haoren, and 6 people from the Qing Tsang Holy Ground were left. There was a total of 11 people, and all of them were at the Great Circle of Truth-severing stage. Even if Du Xiaofu wasn't included, the other 10 people's combined strength was already terrifying enough. They could barely contend with the first sky of Immortal Realm expert. "Let's go!" Du Xiaofu said softly. Then, he and the others continued to go deeper. In front of them, most of the people from the forces that had been swallowed by the Blood Sea had already begun to retreat in panic. Only 2 people were still there, preparing to continue forward. "This is a force from one of the Divine Kingdoms. They have a Great Circle of Truth-severing stage cultivator. They are very strong." Du Xiaofu observed those people and made some judgments in his heart. A Divine Kingdom force with a Great Circle of Truth-severing stage cultivator could definitely be ranked at the forefront of the 72 Divine Kingdoms. At least, before entering the Divine Demon Battle Realm, the Yuqing Divine Kingdom didn't even have a Great Circle of Truth-severing stage cultivator. Because of the terrifying opportunity of obtaining the Black Blood Evil Grass, Meng Dongyang and the other 2 had easily broken through to the Great Circle of Truth-severing stage. On the side, the Great Circle of Truth-severing stage cultivator from the Divine Kingdom force looked at Du Xiaofu and the others with a terrified gaze. He treated these 11 people as a force, so he didn't dare to look at them too much. He was afraid that he would bring disaster upon himself. Du Xiaofu and the others didn't delay. They quickly moved, using their extreme speed to go further into the Blood Sea. Just as they had expected, the more they went forward, the thicker the terrifying murderous aura was. It lingered in the hearts of the 11 experts, and they couldn't get rid of it. Fortunately, their cultivations were very strong, so they were able to resist it. A boundless sea of blood. How many creatures must have died in order to form such a terrifying area? Everyone's eyes were filled with shock. They were shocked by the vastness of the sea of blood. In their hearts, their imaginations of the ancient war were refreshed once again. It was definitely much more tragic than they had imagined. The blood sea below was incomparably thick. After countless years of sedimentation, it actually didn't dry up. This monotonous and boring scene, coupled with the terrifying power that constantly invaded their bodies and souls, made them more and more impatient as they moved forward. "Look, there's something ahead!" Zhang Haoren shouted from afar as he excitedly pointed into the distance. Almost at the end of their line of sight, there was a hill-like object protruding from the blood sea, appearing in front of everyone's eyes. "Let's go take a look!" Du Xiaofu took the lead and rushed over. Not long after, the scenery there became clear. "It's actually an island, and it's very large," Xiao Yun said softly. He saw a huge island with a radius of at least tens of thousands of miles. On this island, the earth and rocks were messy, and there were also many tall mountains that rose from the ground. Among them, one of the most slender peaks was snapped off at the waist, falling head first into the sea of blood, soaking in boundless black blood. It looked just like a long sword lying there, its might intimidating. "There should be something extraordinary on this island. Let's go take a look." Zhang Haoren's eyes burned brightly while his entire body surged with powerful fluctuations, and he was constantly resisting the terrifying baleful aura that penetrated every inch of the island. "Someone has beaten us to it." Du Xiaofu looked ahead. Many figures had appeared there, and all of them were flying in the sky as they approached the enormous island from other directions. "As expected, the various powers have received the news, and many of them have rushed over here." Xiao Yun spoke in a light voice. With a single glance, he was able to see that there were almost 20 figures in all directions. Obviously, the other forces had also sent their disciples away to avoid unnecessary losses. Let's go! Let's go take a look! Du Xiaofu directly flew out, and it didn't take long for him to reach the sky above the island. At this time, the experts from all directions had also arrived. They were separated by tens of thousands of miles as they looked at each other from afar. I actually met a few familiar faces. Looking in a certain direction, Du Xiaofu's mouth involuntarily curled into a sinister smile. In front of him to the right, 3 people at the perfection stage of true severing stood there, and all of them had extraordinary bearings. Oh? The Jade Feather Sacred Ground? Xiaoyun raised his eyebrows, but he didn't care about the existence of the 3 people. Of course, he had also heard that the Jade Feather Sacred Ground had suffered a great loss at the hands of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom in an ancient forest a few years ago, and Du Xiaofu had a grudge with them. The Yuqing Divine Emperor! Just as they were sizing up the other party, the Jade Feather Sacred Grounds trio was also staring at Du Xiaofu. They felt their teeth itch when they saw this purple-robed youth. The Jade Feather Sacred Ground had actually suffered such a great loss when fighting for the Black Blood Spirit Zoisha back then. However, the Yuqing Divine Kingdom was obviously not easy to deal with. The most important thing was that the young Divine Emperor was simply too terrifying. They actually broke through again! And it's 4 people! After a little careful observation, the Jade Feather Sacred Ground's eyes sank. It wasn't difficult for him to discover that Du Xiaofu, Teng Yuanshan, Zhang Haoren, and Meng Dongyang were all at the perfection stage of true severing realm. Didn't that mean that the purple-robed youth had become even more terrifying? It must be that black blood spirit Zoisha that allowed them to obtain unimaginable benefits. The Jade Feather Sacred Ground's knuckles cracked, and his heart was filled with hatred. When they fought earlier, the other party didn't even have a single perfection stage of true severing realm. But in just a few years, 4 had appeared all of a sudden. The blow to him was simply too great. Humph, Jade Feather Sacred Ground, do you want to fight again? Zhang Haoren suddenly snorted coldly and loudly said to the Jade Feather Sacred Grounds trio. His entire body exuded battle intent, and he didn't look like he was retreating at all as he charged into the distance. You! The Jade Feather Sacred Grounds' teeth were about to shatter. Things were different now. Back then, the Yuqing Divine Emperor alone could fight more than 20 of them. Now that he had broken through again, the 3 of them were simply not enough to deal with him. Moreover, the purple-robed youth had 11 perfection stage true severing realm cultivators beside him. If they fought against him, they probably wouldn't even be able to withstand a few slaps. Qing Tsang's Sacred Ground. How did they get together with the Yuqing Divine Kingdom? The Jade Feather Sacred Ground's heart was filled with dread as he looked at Xiaoyun and the others. As one of the 35 sacred grounds, they naturally knew how powerful the Qing Tsang's Sacred Ground was. In terms of overall strength, it was probably ranked 7th or 8th among all the sacred grounds. Among the young experts of this generation, the Qing Tsang's Sacred Ground was even more terrifying. They had many experts, and their sacred ground's strength could definitely rank in the top 3 of the 35 sacred grounds. It was a terrifying existence. Many people felt that the Qing Tsang's Sacred Ground's training in the Divine Demon Battle Realm had at least a 20% chance of breaking through to the Immortal Realm. The Jade Feather Sacred Ground really couldn't understand why the people of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom and the Qing Tsang's Sacred Ground had connections. Moreover, the 2 of them seemed to be very friendly. This made him extremely fearful. Let's go! The Jade Feather Sacred Ground didn't respond to Zhang Haoren's words. Instead, he gloomily said to the 2 people beside him. It was definitely not a wise move to start a conflict with the Yuqing Divine Kingdom at this time. Since they had come to this isolated island, it was better to explore it first. After all, this island was very big and was enough for everyone to search for a while. Let them go! Seeing that Zhang Haoren wanted to stop the Jade Feather Sacred Grounds group from leaving, Du Xiaofu stopped him and said softly. With that, he descended towards the island. Don't land on the rocks. Just fly in the air. The soil on this island is very strange. I'm afraid it will be dangerous, Xiao Yun reminded everyone as he hovered 3 feet above the ground. As soon as his voice fell, the 11 of them heard a mournful scream in the distance. With the power of their primordial spirits, they discovered that an expert from an unknown faction had landed on the rocks and turned into a pool of blood. He had died instantly. This island is surrounded by a vast sea of blood. After countless years of contamination, the powerful life forms that died here have gathered together. They are no longer ordinary rocks. They have the most terrifying corrosive power. Du Xiaofu lifted his eyelids and said softly. Chapter 2839. Not to mention the rocks on this island, even the aura in the air is unbearable. Wouldn't it be equivalent to seeking death if we landed on the ground? Ting Yuanshan rubbed his nose and said. Obviously, the person who died in the distance was too careless. This was a dangerous place, and extremely terrifying. However, it was precisely this kind of place that could nurture even more extraordinary things. Unfortunately, the strange power here is too strong and greatly hinders the power of the primordial spirit. It is very troublesome to explore. Zhang Haoren frowned slightly and said. Under the encirclement of the boundless blood sea, this space was filled with scarlet. Especially on the surface of the island, there was a faint red mist lingering around it. When the power of the primordial spirit was used, it could not detect too far away. Otherwise, with their strength, they would only need to sense a little to see through the mysteries of this small island that was tens of thousands of miles wide. In this way, they could only search bit by bit. Du Xiaofu and the others approached the ground and began to explore. This island was filled with strange rocks that were scattered all over. There was a wide mountain range that stretched from east to west, and there were also some hills. There were no traces of a great battle here. This was probably similar to the vast ancient forest that they had encountered earlier. It was one of the few places that was relatively well preserved. Only the broken mountain peak in the distance had fallen into the blood sea. It showed that this place had also been affected by the aftermath of a great battle. There's a treasure! Just as everyone was carefully exploring, a disciple of the Qing Tsang's sacred ground suddenly shouted. As he spoke, his body quickly leaped out and landed near a huge reddish-black mountain rock. In the crack of the mountain rock, a palm-sized jade-green plant grew. Sparkling light emitted from its branches and leaves, and a fragrance filled the air. This plant did not look special, but in the eyes of Du Xiaofu, Xiao Yun, and the others, they immediately saw that it was extraordinary. Another stalk of precious medicine! There is not much in this divine demon battlefield, but there is definitely an abundance of treasure herbs. Everyone's eyes shone with a green light as they could not help but mutter to themselves. Quickly pick it! Everyone did not need to think too much and directly acted. This treasure herb was indeed extraordinary. It took them a lot of effort to pick it. There should be many treasures here. Since we are traveling together, let's distribute them according to the number of people. Xiao Yun smiled and looked at Du Xiaofu and said, You all can take this treasure herb first. Let's continue to search. All right. Du Xiaofu nodded to show his agreement. There were many disciples of great forces on this island, and almost all of them were powerhouses of the Holy Land. As for the disciples of the divine nations, those who could come here could be counted on one hand. Uses, and himself. There were only 4 people from the Yuqings of the divine demon battlefield. Then, they continued to the others on too. Just as they'd expected at the beginning, this place was extremely abundant with treasures, and they might encounter one in the crevices of rocks, mountain streams, and so on and so forth. In just a few days' time, he had actually obtained 20 extraordinary items. This place is too terrifying. There are so many good things here. A disciple from the sacred ground could not help but exclaim with a smile on his face. Although the things they obtained were not comparable to the black baleful blood Ganoderma and blood jade spirit ginseng that Du Xiaofu had obtained earlier, they were definitely not too far off. Because their primordial spirits were being disturbed, their search was not fast. It could even be said that it was very slow. If it was like in the outside world, the primordial spirits could be used to sense a large area. Then, the tens of thousands of miles of the island would have been turned upside down by everyone. Let's continue. Everyone was in high spirits as they searched everywhere to obtain more benefits. At this moment, a buzzing sound suddenly came from afar. Accompanying it was a vast wave of energy that rushed over. Whoosh! The surrounding space was stirred up as if a 1,000-foot wave had been stirred up. It slammed onto Du Xiaofu, Xiao Yun, and the others. Something's happening! Everyone reacted in an instant. This wave of energy was unusual. Something must have happened. They jumped into the sky with a swoosh and looked into the distance. In the air, the restrictions on the primordial spirits were much less. With a glance, they discovered that in the center of the island, there was a dazzling light shooting out. Energy waves surged, releasing a domineering aura. There, several figures were thrown out, and all of them were thrown high into the sky. Those are the people from the Wind Thunder Sacred Ground. Xiao Yun glanced over and immediately recognized the identities of those people. Are they in trouble? Everyone was a little puzzled. That energy wave was very terrifying. It directly sent several Sacred Ground disciples at the true Severing Perfection stage flying. Although that attack just now was not enough to put their lives in danger, they definitely suffered some injuries. I'm afraid that something good has appeared. Du Xiaofu suddenly licked his lips, the corners of his mouth curling into a smile as he spoke. Let's go and take a look. Meng Dongyang called out, and then he took the lead and quickly rushed over. Du Xiaofu, Xiao Yun, Ting Yuanshan, Zhang Haoren, and the others were not slow either. In a flash, they flew tens of thousands of miles and arrived at the center of the island. At this moment, the violent energy that filled the sky had slowly converged, and it had become much calmer. The 5 figures that had been sent flying also rushed back from the distance. Their auras were slightly unstable, and their expressions were not too good. There's a treasure below. Zhang Haoren did not care about this at all. He only looked down. Du Xiaofu, Xiao Yun, and the others also looked down at the same time. In their line of sight, there was a large canyon below. There was a small pool in the canyon. It was only about 30 meters in size and was not very eye-catching. However, the scene in this small pool caused everyone's eyes to widen. Surrounded by the vast sea of blood, everything on this island is stained with blood, but why is the water in this small pool so clear? Meng Dongyang murmured with a look of disbelief. There was a clear spring in the small pool. It looked no different from an ordinary spring, but it was very strange for it to appear in this place. In addition to the clear water in the pool, what was even more eye-catching was the 9 green lotus leaves growing in the pool, gently swaying. These 9 lotus leaves set off a pure white lotus in the middle, making it even more eye-catching. What kind of lotus is this? Du Xiaofu's eyes trembled fiercely. Although the aura released by the lotus was very weak, it was no different from an ordinary lotus. However, he instinctively felt that this was definitely an extraordinary item. To be able to grow on this island and be surrounded by a clear spring, how could it be a simple thing? This is definitely an unimaginable treasure. A disciple of the Qing Tsung Holy Land looked down and said softly. As he spoke, he wanted to take action and pluck it, but he was stopped by Xiao Yun. I'm afraid that the person from the Wind and Thunder Holy Land was sent flying because he wanted to pluck it. Why don't we wait first? As Xiao Yun spoke, he looked at Du Xiaofu, wanting to hear his opinion. This thing is probably very difficult to obtain, and it will be accompanied by danger. Du Xiaofu thought for a moment, and then said, Many people have come. Let's see the situation first. His eyes were blazing with a blazing intent. After glancing at the small pond and the lotus flowers below, he glanced around. At this moment, figures flashed from all directions. They were the disciples of the various major forces, with the 35 Holy Lands as the main force. Obviously, the commotion here was too big and attracted the attention of others. True Yen Holy Land, Huanchu Holy Land, Emperor Dragon Holy Land, Tao Profound Holy Land, Shocking Star Holy Land, Spirit Astral Holy Land. Xiaoyun looked at these people and said the names of the Holy Lands one by one. In the blink of an eye, 70 to 80 figures arrived in front of everyone in the blink of an eye. This number was almost all the people on this island. Are these the holy sons and holy daughters of the various holy lands? Du Xiaofu secretly said. From his observation, the people who came were all very powerful. They were all at the complete true severing realm, and there were even a few women among them. Especially the people leading each group. Their bodies were surrounded by an unfathomable aura that was extremely vast and deep. Needless to say, they were the holy sons and holy daughters of the various holy lands. And among these holy sons and holy daughters, there were 3 people that Du Xiaofu couldn't help but take a few more glances. This was because he could feel a very terrifying power from these people. Their strength was probably not below Xiaoyun's. That sturdy young man is the holy son of the Huanchu Holy Land, Su Mo Yen. Xiaoyun moved to Du Xiaofu's side and said as he looked at the young leader of the group. Over there is the holy son of the true Yen Holy Land, Qi Yuanlin. Over there is the holy daughter of the Mirror Moon Holy Land, Lian Kaiyan. Xiaoyun looked in 2 other directions and pointed at a handsome young man and a beautiful woman in colorful clothes. Su Mo Yen, Qi Yuanlin, and Lian Kaiyan. These 3 people are very terrifying. The Huanchu Holy Land, True Yen Holy Land, and Mirror Moon Holy Land behind them are the top 3 of the 35 holy lands of the Supreme Changrong Heaven. This kind of background is indeed frightening. Du Xiaofu's eyes narrowed as he muttered. The 3 people that Xiaoyun pointed at were the ones that he had paid special attention to. Du Xiaofu also didn't expect that they would come from the 3 strongest holy lands. They were much stronger than the Qingtsang Holy Land behind Xiaoyun. However, amongst the experts of this generation, Xiaoyun's strength wasn't inferior to them. Of the 35 holy lands, there are probably no less than 20 people here. As for the 72 divine kingdoms, there aren't many. Other than the 4 of us, there are less than 10 people here. Ting Yuanshan secretly observed. From the number of experts in each group, he could roughly determine whether they came from a holy land or a divine kingdom. Relatively speaking, there were strong and weak holy lands. Including Xiao Chu and the others, there were about 90 people here. This is going to be lively. There are nearly 100 true severing perfection stage experts here. I'm afraid that some people won't be able to resist and make a move. Beside Xiaoyun, a disciple of the Qingtsang Holy Land smacked his lips and said, The 9 lotus leaves and the lotus flower in the middle were all unimaginably good things. Now that so many experts had come, there would definitely be a fight over them. Sure enough, just as he finished speaking, a group of holy lands with 6 true severing consummate cultivators walked out, and directly made a move, plundering downwards. Walala! The 6 people cooperated very well. 6 resplendent lights intertwined together, and imprinted themselves into the small pond below. That terrifying power vibrated endlessly, and a terrifying aura rolled out. It had to be said that the strength of a Holy Land's disciple was very terrifying. When a few of them attacked at the same time, the power they displayed was enough to move mountains and burn the sky and boil the sea. However, it was precisely such a terrifying power that when it reached a height of 30 feet above the pool, it suddenly encountered a fierce obstruction, and was unable to descend any further. In the next instant, the 9 lotus leaves and the lotus flower in the middle suddenly shook, and thousands of rays of light rushed out. It was as if a huge pot lid was rapidly expanding. Not good, retreat quickly! Immediately, among the 100 people who had just arrived, an expert shouted loudly. He pulled up his fellow disciples and ran away, flying into the distance. Walla! Another powerful shockwave rippled out, instantly sending the 6 people who had attacked flying. Every one of them spat out a mouthful of blood, floating in the void. Their injuries were not light. When everything returned to normal again, everyone flew back and looked at the lotus leaves and lotus flower below in shock. They were speechless. What kind of treasure is this? It actually has such terrifying power! An expert said in a daze, and he felt very afraid. These people all had the strength of the true severing perfection stage. In the 33 heavens they were not the best, but they could be said to be absolutely powerful. Even so, the wind and thunder Holy Land and the 6 disciples who had just attacked could not touch the lotus leaves and lotus flower. 9 lotus leaves surrounding a lotus flower. I have never heard of such a thing, someone said, and he was also very puzzled. After the hundreds of young experts returned and exchanged a few simple words, everyone suddenly stopped talking, and the scene inexplicably fell into a strange silence. No one rashly attacked again, as if they all wanted to see others take the lead. Although they are all very young, they are all very cunning. Du Xiaofu cursed in his heart as he looked at the experts one by one. Obviously, no one wanted to be the one who took the lead and then be injured by the rebound of the 9-leaf lotus. In this way, in the subsequent battle, they would definitely suffer a great loss. Since it's like this, let me be the one who selflessly contributes. Du Xiaofu's eyes flashed. After greeting Ting Yuanshan, Zhang Haoren, Meng Dongyang, Xiao Yun, and the others, he swooped down. Brother Du. Xiao Yun wanted to pull him back and say something, but in the end, he withdrew his hand. Let the Divine Emperor go. He can always do things that ordinary people can't do. If we can obtain this 9-leaf lotus flower, we will have struck it rich. Meng Dongyang smiled and spoke to Xiao Yun, but his eyes were not looking at him. He only stared at Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu's actions also attracted the surprised gazes of the surrounding people. Who is that purple-robed kid? He actually wants to be the one who takes the lead? Humph, I'm afraid he is a whimsical guy who thinks he is extraordinary enough to do things that others can't. The person with him seems to be from the Qing Tsang Holy Ground. Could he be a disciple of the Qing Tsang Holy Ground? It doesn't seem like it. The white-robed man is undoubtedly the holy son of the Qing Tsang Holy Ground, Xiao Yun. However, he seems to be very polite to the purple-robed youth. Holy Son Xiao Yun's strength can be ranked in the top 3 among his peers of the 35 holy grounds. Who is this person that he is so polite to? Many people were very puzzled. They didn't know Du Xiaofu's origins. They only saw the purple-robed youth together with the Qing Tsang Holy Ground's Xiao Yun. Moreover, Xiao Yun didn't put on any airs of a holy son. This was even more surprising. Among the 35 holy grounds, who could make Xiao Yun treat them like this? Even if it was the Huanchu Holy Grounds Su Mo Yen, the True Yen Holy Grounds Ji Yuanlin, or the Mirror Moon Holy Grounds Lian Kaiyun, they would only arouse Xiao Yun's fighting spirit. That kid gives me a familiar feeling. Suddenly, someone looked at Du Xiaofu and said, Now that you mention it, I also remember. He seems to be very similar to the Yuqing Divine Kingdom's Divine Emperor. Very quickly, an expert remembered the various rumors from a few years ago. At that time, the small Yuqing Divine Kingdom had suddenly started to circulate in the Divinity Demon battle realm. It was said that their newly appointed Yuqing Divine Emperor, who was only at the true Severing realm, was able to look down on the holy sons and holy daughters of the 35 holy grounds as if they were nothing. He could defeat them all by himself. Many people could tell that such arrogant words were deliberately spread by people with ulterior motives. However, it definitely aroused everyone's interest in the Yuqing Divine Emperor. After seeing the purple-robed youth, the disciples of the various holy grounds finally confirmed Du Xiaofu's identity. Yuqing Divine Emperor? Why is he together with the Qing Tsang Holy Ground? Su Mo Yen of the Huanchu Holy Ground glanced at Du Xiaofu and then glanced in Xiao Yun's direction. He was somewhat puzzled. Yuqing Divine Emperor, for Holy Son Qing Tsang to treat him like this, he must be very strong. Qi Yuanlin of the True Yen Holy Ground also spoke. His eyes flashed with a strange light as he was very interested in Du Xiaofu. No matter why the Yuqing Divine Emperor and the Qing Tsang Holy Ground were together, it could be seen from Xiao Chu's attitude towards the purple-robed youth that the purple-robed youth was definitely not an ordinary person. His strength was probably not below Xiao Yun's. Does he really have the confidence to obtain the 9-leaf lotus? Many people were doubtful. If an ordinary person made a move, they would only be laughed at. However, if an expert made a move, many people's hearts would rise to their throats. No matter how strong that kid is, how much stronger can he be compared to Su Mo Yen, Qi Yuanlin, Lian Kaiyun, and Xiao Yun? The 4 holy sons and holy daughters have not made a move yet. What is he trying to do? Seeing Du Xiaofu reach for the 9-leaf lotus, many people still did not believe that he would succeed. Chapter 2840. On this island, the strongest young experts of Changrong heaven were gathered. Under everyone's gaze, Du Xiaofu had already descended to a height of 200 feet above the 9-leaf lotus. Perhaps forcefully taking it won't work. Du Xiaofu's eyes flashed as he thought to himself. If forcefully won't work, I'll try a soft approach. Previously, the disciples of the 2 holy lands had been sent flying by forcefully taking the 9-leaf lotus. He did not want to end up like those people. Therefore, he did not intend to forcefully take it. Instead, he stood in the air and quietly closed his eyes. What is that kid trying to do? Is he stupid? He can get the 9-leaf lotus just by standing there? Don't be anxious. Let's see what he's trying to do first. Some of the experts were dumbfounded. Du Xiaofu's actions confused them. However, there were also people who were rational. They believed that the purple-robed youth was definitely powerful and that there must be a reason for his actions. Du Xiaofu ignored everyone's strange gazes. Instead, he slowly activated the power of laws in his body. Huff, huff, huff! The law of matter was released, and a dazzling light spread out. Layers of law ripples were engraved in the air, carrying with them a terrifying aura. Under Du Xiaofu's control, the power of laws slowly extended downwards. Soon, it reached a height of 30 feet above the 9-leaf lotus. In an instant, a powerful wave of energy rippled out, forming a gigantic barrier of light that enveloped the 9-leaf lotus flower. In an instant, Du Xiaofu felt his law of matter tremble fiercely. It was extremely difficult to resist the power of the law of matter. Fortunately, he controlled the power of laws very gently, and did not cause a violent backlash from the light shield. Withdraw! He did not dare to continue using the power of laws. He immediately withdrew all his power to prevent himself from being sent flying like the previous 2 groups of people. Can I use a soft approach? Du Xiaofu muttered to himself, and frowned slightly. Then, when the light shield around the 9-leaf lotus disappeared, he made his move again. This time, the laws of space and matter acted at the same time, and they pressed down towards the 9-petal lotus. However, the outcome was the same as before. After a wave of ferocious fluctuations arose, Du Xiaofu immediately retreated and stopped trying. He wanted to use the power of laws to penetrate the light barrier, but he didn't expect it to be so fierce that his power of laws couldn't penetrate it at all. Hey, who does that brat think he is? Even the combined forces of the 2 holy lands were unable to penetrate that light barrier. Does he still want to seize it with his own strength? At this time, one of the Holy Land's disciples sneered, crossing his arms as he glared at Du Xiaofu, his eyes filled with disdain. That purple-robed youth was definitely someone who believed himself to be infallible, and was indulging in his fantasies. How strong can a guy from a divine nation be? Does he really think that he can compare to the holy sons and holy daughters of our holy lands? There were also cultivators who snorted and cast mocking glances at Du Xiaofu. Let him jump around. In any case, the 9-petal lotus is very difficult to pick. Let's just take it as us probing the situation, someone said. Their voice was calm, but they couldn't conceal the contempt in their words. A disciple from Yuqing divine nation, even if he unexpectedly had the status of a divine emperor, was still someone from a divine nation. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't be that strong. At the very least, in front of the strongest holy sons and holy daughters, that brat was nothing. However, there were some cultivators in the crowd who didn't think so. For example, Huanchu Holy Lands Su Mo Yen, Tru Yen Holy Lands Ji Yuanlin, Mirror Moon Holy Lands Lian Kaiyun, and so on. This fellow isn't simple. He actually grasped 2 primal laws and even reached the complete true severing realm. Su Mo Yen softly said, talking to himself. He looked at Du Xiaofu. He didn't think that this youth was just for show. Instead, he thought that this youth was definitely strong. This person's cultivation is absolutely terrifying. I fear that he isn't any weaker than us. Qi Yuanlin also muttered. He couldn't help but look deeply at Du Xiaofu. Brother Du actually grasped two primal laws. No wonder his strength felt so deep and vast. Xiao Yun raised his eyebrows and was surprised. He had traveled with Du Xiaofu for a long time, but the other party had never revealed much. Although the two primal laws were controlled very well, Xiao Yun was still keenly aware of it. This made Xiao Yun's heart tremble. I hope that the Divine Emperor can take that lotus. In the crowd, only Ting Yuanshan, Zhang Haoren, and Meng Dongyang were calm. They knew Du Xiaofu quite well. Their Divine Emperor had grasped four primal laws and had reached the complete true severing realm. What he had revealed just now was only two primal laws. The three of them even believed that as long as Du Xiaofu used all his strength, it wasn't impossible for him to forcefully take the 9-petal lotus. In fact, Du Xiaofu had the same thoughts as them. Since the soft approach won't work, I'll just take it by force. After 2 failed attempts, he no longer hesitated and directly summoned the 9 purple lightning cauldrons. Swoosh, 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 the 9 cauldrons moved through the air and drew 9 shocking trajectories in the void. Above them, torrential purple lightning was vast and mighty. It was like 9 waterfalls hanging in the void, filled with an overbearing and peerless aura. As soon as these 9 divine thunder cauldrons appeared, everyone present was shocked. What kind of treasure is that? What a terrifying aura! From the looks of it, it seems to be no less powerful than a high-grade true treasure. How can a small Yuqing divine kingdom have such a deep foundation? Could that be their divine kingdom's imperial seal? It doesn't look like it. Those 9 cauldrons don't have any dragon aura. They're just normal treasures. Many people were very surprised and couldn't help but speak. As they spoke, Du Xiaofu had already controlled the 9 lightning cauldrons to move quickly and suppress the 9-petal lotus. Rumble! The 9 peerless treasures crushed the void and let out a thunderous sound. The torrential purple lightning surged and intertwined with each other, instantly descending on the 9-petal lotus. Buzz! Instantly, a terrifying buzzing noise arose and all 9 levels of heaven and all 10 levels of hell shook violently. The huge light shield appeared again. Under the ferocious power of the purple lightning cauldrons, a terrifying energy halo was stirred up and suddenly expanded to the surroundings. I don't believe that I can't suppress you. Suppress! Du Xiaofu snorted and suddenly pressed down with both palms. Rumble! Following that, the 9 lightning cauldrons whistled and moved, directly suppressing the huge light shield. The terrifying collision between these two completely different forces caused the surrounding space to be affected by the tremors, collapsing piece by piece. The 9 cauldrons were indeed not ordinary objects. Under the terrifying impact of the light shield, they were able to stabilize it and suppress it until it couldn't move. Break it! Du Xiaofu's eyes narrowed. While controlling the 9 cauldrons, he slammed his palm down fiercely. In this palm, there was a domineering force that could suppress the heavens and the earth. It was extremely fierce and bloomed with ferocious power as it directly hit the light shield. Crack! A slight shattering sound was heard and entered everyone's ears. The disciples of the various major forces couldn't help but raise their eyebrows. Looking down, they saw that the layer of light shield above the 9-petal lotus had a finger-long crack. This scene made everyone feel very surprised. Previously, several people from the 2 holy lands joined forces and were unable to forcefully break the light shield. However, in the hands of the purple-robed young man, such a result had occurred. This made many people who looked down on Du Xiaofu no longer underestimate the purple-robed young man. It actually worked! Du Xiaofu was overjoyed and was about to jump up and down. How could he hesitate any longer? He continued to control the purple lightning profound cauldron to suppress the expansion of the light shield. At the same time, one terrifying palm print after another was sent out by him, brazenly hitting the light shield. Boom, boom, boom. With each hit, the void produced a terrifying trembling sound, as if an invisible left and right hand were violently shaking. At the same time, the subtle cracking sounds became more and more frequent, and the sound became louder and louder. On the light shield, terrifying cracks spread out like a spider's web and climbed up every inch of it. However, although there were cracks and the power of the light shield had weakened, there were still no signs of it collapsing. It was terrifyingly strong. Du Xiaofu continued to bombard it fiercely and exerted all the strength in his body. Gradually, beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He didn't stop. As long as there were cracks on the light shield, he would definitely be able to break it and break through its obstruction to obtain the 9-petal lotus. All of this was seen by many of the powerhouses in the sky. They were all shocked and in disbelief. How can that guy be so strong? This is too terrifying. Is he really from a kingdom of gods? But the strength that he is displaying now is not any weaker than the strongest few holy sons and holy daughters. This Yuqing Divine Emperor is too terrifying. Just by using his physical body, he can cause cracks to appear on the light shield. Let me ask you, how many people can do this? You can't underestimate him. You really can't underestimate him. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed that he could be so strong. It seems like the rumors from a few years ago were not groundless. Even if someone purposely made him up, this guy definitely has the strength to fight with the holy sons and holy daughters. The strength that Du Xiaofu displayed shocked everyone. At this moment, he borrowed the strength of the immortal Xian body. Just the strength of his physical body alone had reached the peak of perfection, which made many powerhouses look askance. With such terrifying strength, he could really directly fight with the strongest few holy sons and holy daughters. This was hard for everyone to believe. After all, the purple-robed youth was only from a kingdom of gods. No wonder he could inherit the position of Divine Emperor with the strength of a true severing cultivator. Just this strength alone is enough to convince everyone. This Yuqing Divine Emperor is too terrifying. Even in the entire 33 heavens, he is definitely a rare genius. Under his leadership, the Yuqing Kingdom will probably have unimaginable leaps and bounds in the future. Many people thought of this in their hearts. At first, when they heard that a true severing cultivator had become the Divine Emperor of a kingdom of gods, the strange emotions that arose disappeared like smoke in thin air from the purple-robed youth's performance. Among the crowd, only Meng Dongyang, Zhang Haoren, and Ting Yuanshan, the 3 young disciples from the Yuqing Kingdom, were relatively calm. They were not at all surprised by the strength that Du Xiaofu had displayed. Instead, the 3 of them could see that Du Xiaofu had not used his full strength. At this moment, he was only using the strength of his physical body. It was obvious that their Divine Emperor did not want to reveal his full strength too early. After all, there were close to 100 people watching covetously. Once the light shield was broken, there would definitely be people fighting over the 9-leaf lotus inside, and there would definitely be people fighting over it. After all, Du Xiaofu was only one person. Even with the 3 of them and the Qingcang Holy Lands that they were on good terms with, there were only a dozen or so people. It would be extremely difficult for them to break through such a large formation and protect the treasure. Boom, boom, boom! Du Xiaofu attacked again and again, creating earth-shattering sounds. In just half an incense stick's time, he had attacked no less than 10,000 times. As the tyrannical power leaked out, the fine cracks on the light shield finally turned into cracks and it really shattered. Finally, after a boom, the entire light shield finally exploded into pieces and turned into energy fragments that filled the sky and rushed into the sky and the ground. The magnificent aura swept across the place and directly sent all the onlookers flying. On the other hand, Du Xiaofu quickly summoned the 9 purple lightning profound cauldrons and held them tightly around his body to resist this violent impact. Just as the energy wave weakened, he immediately rushed to the side of the small pool below and stretched out his hand to grab the 9-leaf lotus in the water. The energy shield is broken! Quickly get the 9-leaf lotus! A powerhouse shouted. In an instant, he broke through the barrier of space and directly came to Du Xiaofu's side. An incomparably brilliant sword light attacked him. The treasure is hard to come by, we can't lose it! Kill! Very quickly, another expanse of dark and misty light swept over, wanting to blast Du Xiaofu away. In just a moment, there were already no less than 10 people attacking Du Xiaofu at the same time, trying to snatch the 9-leaf lotus from under his hands. Du Xiaofu's face instantly turned gloomy. He had already expected this outcome. Indeed, wealth could move people's hearts. In the face of such a rare treasure, no one wanted to give it up so easily. At this moment, no one would take the treasure for granted just because they were the ones who broke the light shield outside the 9-leaf lotus. The final destination of the 9-leaf lotus still depended on who was stronger, and whose fist was harder. Chi chi chi! Waves of dangerous aura rushed towards the purple-robed young man. Without thinking, he waved his hand and fiercely threw the 9 purple lightning profound cauldrons out to meet the people who attacked him. However, after the 10 people were all pushed back, even more powerhouses rushed over. Brother Du, quickly take the treasure. I will stop them. At this moment, Xiao Yun's voice rang out and entered Du Xiaofu's ears. He led the dozen people from the Qingtsang Holy Ground, along with the Yuqing Divine Kingdom's Tingyuanshan, Zhang Haoren, and Meng Dongyang to intercept the incoming group of people. Xiao Yun, you want to stop us? Su Mo Yen from the Huanchu Holy Ground frowned as he looked at Xiao Yun in front of him. The Yuqing Divine Emperor is my friend and he was the one who broke the light shield. Do you want me to let you deal with him? Xiao Yun raised his eyes and said matter-of-factly. It just so happens that we haven't fought in a long time. I want to see how much you've improved over the years. As he spoke, his expression changed from his usual calm to fierce, releasing a strong sense of dominance. Do you think you can stop the 3 of us by yourself? Su Mo Yen looked at him in surprise and said coldly. Since you want to fight, I'll grant you your wish. I want to see if you have the qualifications to be on the same level as us with your current strength. At this time, Qi Yuanlin from the True Yen Holy Ground also spoke. It's all for the treasure. Don't blame us for bullying you with numbers. The Holy Maiden of the Mirror Moon Holy Ground, Lian Kaiyun, stood in front of Xiao Yun and advanced towards him with Su Mo Yen and Qi Yuanlin. The auras of the 3 surged out and the power of laws intertwined, creating huge waves. What nonsense! Come and fight! Xiao Yun was arrogant and domineering. His white robe was straight, and under the impact of the storm of laws, he did not move at all. Fight! The top 3 holy sons and holy maidens of the 35 holy grounds of the transcendent Changrong heaven shouted at the same time, and quickly attacked Xiao Yun. Instantly, a huge battle began. Kill! Get the 9-leaf lotus! Not only this side, the other experts also attacked at the same time, charging towards Tingyuanshan, Zhang Haoren, Meng Dongyang, and the dozen people from the Qingtsang Holy Ground. A terrifying battle broke out in the sky. Everyone here was from the transcendent Changrong heaven, and could even be said to be the top of the 33 heavens. Their strength was terrifying. In just a moment, the void was destroyed and turned into a chaotic state. Hold on! I'll help you in a while. Du Xiaofu looked at the situation in the sky and realized that Xiao Yun's strength was really terrifying. He actually blocked the combined attack of 3 holy sons and holy maidens by himself. Of course, it was not easy for him. He was firmly suppressed and suffered light injuries after a few exchanges. Even so, Xiao Yun was still fighting with all his might, and he was holding back the 3 great experts here. The situation of the other people was not so good. Tingyuanshan, Zhang Haoren, Meng Dongyang, and the other disciples of the Qingtsang Holy Ground were quickly pushed back by the attacks of dozens of people. They were not a match for them at all. Stop them and buy time for the Divine Emperor! Zhang Haoren shouted angrily, and a terrifying aura surged from his body. He used all his strength to envelop a few people, trying to restrain them. However, under the terrifying attacks of the other party, scarlet blood spurted out of the corner of Zhang Haoren's mouth time and time again. Meng Dongyang, Tingyuanshan, and the others were the same. Although they were strong, they definitely could not withstand the attacks of so many experts at the same time. Not long after, their auras were weakened by a lot. Du Xiaofu no longer looked at the situation on the battlefield. Instead, he used all his strength to obtain the 9-leaf lotus. Chapter 2841. When Du Xiaofu's hand touched the pure white lotus, he was overjoyed. Surprisingly, he didn't encounter any obstruction and smoothly grasped it in his palm. Without hesitation, he plucked it and was about to put it into his cosmos bag. However, it was also at this moment that several terrifying sword auras shot through the air and slashed directly at Du Xiaofu's body. He immediately mobilized the 9 divine thunder cauldrons to meet the attack, destroying all of the attacks. With so many experts working together, Ting Yuanshan, Zhang Haoren, Meng Dongyang, and the 7 Qingtsang Holy Ground disciples' defenses were quickly torn apart. The first thing these experts did was to stop Du Xiaofu from getting the pure white lotus. The Yu Qing Divine Emperor has the lotus! Go get it! Immediately, an expert shouted out loud. Attack together! The rest of the people shouted and rushed towards Du Xiaofu. How can you stop the 3 of us with your strength alone? Su Moyan, Qi Yuanlin, and Lian Kaiyun also snorted coldly and attacked Xiaoyun at the same time, instantly pushing him back. After that, the 3 of them paid no further attention to Xiaoyun and pounced towards Du Xiaofu. They hadn't expected that the purple-robed young man would be able to take the 9-petal lotus so easily after breaking through the light barrier. If they didn't act now, the treasure would really fall into the hands of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. Whoever wants the lotus in my hand can come and take it. Du Xiaofu's eyes flashed, and the power in his body surged. The terrifying power of laws swept out. He grabbed the lotus with one hand and clenched his other hand into a fist. The experts who weren't repelled by the 9 cauldrons had already closed in on him. Rumble! The god-binding grip was activated, and the void suddenly exploded. The collapse of space created a terrifying vortex, and all the attacks were crushed into pieces. At this moment, the disciples of the 3 Holy Lands who had broken free from Xiaoyun also closed in. They attacked at the same time and attacked Du Xiaofu, but their attacks were easily destroyed. Du Xiaofu's strength was far above the 3 of them. Even if the 3 of them worked together, they couldn't pose any threat to him. Reaching the complete true severing stage with the 4 primal laws was different from normal. No one knew if anyone had ever done such a terrifying thing. Therefore, in just one exchange, Du Xiaofu was able to easily break through the joint attack of the 3. But then, he raised his eyebrows slightly, feeling very surprised. After the 3 of them attacked him, they didn't continue to attack him. Instead, they turned and rushed towards the small pool behind him. Lotus! In that instant, Du Xiaofu knew what they were planning. Not only was there a lotus in the clear pool, there were also 9 lotus leaves. Because of the sudden attack of the experts, he didn't have time to pluck them. The lotus was undoubtedly a treasure, but the lotus leaves were definitely not ordinary. With such benefits, how could the holy maidens of the 3 Holy Lands sit by and do nothing? After thinking about this, Du Xiaofu didn't delay any longer. He quickly turned around and grabbed with his palm, instantly obtaining 3 lotus leaves in his hand. However, Su Mo Yen, Qi Yuanlin, and Lian Kaiyun weren't slow either. They each took 2 lotus leaves. I've eaten all the meat, I'll let you guys drink some soup. A total of 6 lotus leaves were snatched away, but Du Xiaofu wasn't angry at all. His body flashed, and he activated the first style of Fuyao, and immediately appeared beside Xiaoyun. At this moment, Xiaoyun had already suffered heavy injuries. Under the attacks of 3 people with similar cultivation levels, he was indeed unable to deal with them. Du Xiaofu took out some precious medicine and fed it to Xiaoyun. That brat is over there! Many experts looked over and pointed at Du Xiaofu's figure. The greatest benefit of the lotus had already been taken by this brat, and he had even obtained 3 lotus leaves. Aside from Huanchu Holy Lands, Truyen Holy Lands, and Mirror Moon Holy Lands, who had obtained 2 lotus leaves each, the others had obtained nothing. Therefore, they all stared at the purple-robed youth. Many people's auras trembled as they prepared to surround and kill him. Yuqing Divine Emperor, so many of us are here. I'm afraid it's not good for you to be the only one to obtain the benefits. A burly man who looked to be around 30 years old said stiffly as he looked at Du Xiaofu. His eyes flashed with an ominous light as he glanced at Du Xiaofu's cosmos bag again and again. The light shield was broken by me, so the treasures naturally belong to me. I feel that this is quite good, there's nothing wrong with it. Du Xiaofu's expression did not change as he looked at the other party and said. He was not afraid of these people. Although they were all the strongest people in the Changrong heaven, if they really wanted to fight, even if they swarmed him, no one would be able to stop him if he wanted to leave. Moreover, there were the 7 people from Qingtsang Holy Lands and Yuqing Divine Kingdom helping him. You did break the light shield, but with so many eyes watching, it'll be difficult for you to take the treasures for yourself. At this moment, another young man walked out and looked at Du Xiaofu. In my opinion, there are many lotus petals. Why don't you keep half of them and let us distribute the rest? This way, you won't be at a disadvantage. His eyes were burning with greed. The treasures that could be born in this place were definitely terrifying. Moreover, the light shield was extremely terrifying. It was not something that an ordinary item could possess. From this, one could see how extraordinary the lotus and lotus leaves were. How could they not be tempted? Humph! Du Xiaofu suddenly snorted coldly and stared at the young man, saying, I really admire how thick-skinned you are. Shameless words come out of your mouth as soon as you open it, and you don't even need to breathe. If you want the lotus flower, you can all give up on it. To me, even losing a single petal is a great loss. His eyes shone with a divine light as he looked at the young man with an indescribable sense of mockery. He had already made it very clear that the treasures would not be distributed among the people. He had obtained them with his own strength. Why should he let others reap the benefits? However, his attitude quickly attracted the dissatisfaction of many experts. You Qing Divine Emperor, can't you see the situation in front of you? That's right. There are so many people here. If you want to take all the benefits, I'm afraid no one will agree. Speaking of which, with the few people from Yuqing Divine Kingdom and Qingtsang Holy Lands, it's impossible for you to fight against so many experts. Let me give you a piece of advice. Hurry up and hand over the treasures. Otherwise, if a fight breaks out, it won't end well. A few powerhouses jumped out one after another. Their words were fierce, and all of them carried the intention of threatening. Among them, many holy sons and holy daughters of the Holy Lands spoke up. They were not afraid of Du Xiaofu and Qingtsang Holy Lands. There were only a dozen people on both sides. On the other hand, there were over 80 people in total from the various factions. With such a huge disparity, no one would believe that Du Xiaofu would be able to keep the lotus if they really fought for it. The final outcome would be nothing more than being killed by the joint forces of everyone and losing everything in the end. You Qing Divine Emperor, you have to think carefully. Don't harm yourself. The burly man who spoke at the beginning spoke again. He stared at Du Xiaofu with his eyes that were as big as copper bells. The burly man's muscles popped and popped. His aura rose like smoke and rose into the sky. He did not hide his killing intent at all. You talk too much. If you want to take it, just come at me. Let's see if I'm afraid. Du Xiaofu's gaze swept across everyone in the field one by one. He did not avoid the gaze. He discovered that most of the people present had a deep enmity towards him. Only Su Mo Yen of the Huanchu Holy Lands, Qi Yuanlin of the Truyen Holy Lands, and Lian Kaiyun of the Mirror Moon Holy Lands remained expressionless. They didn't say anything to threaten Du Xiaofu. But the disciples of the Holy Lands around them all looked at Du Xiaofu as if he were a lamb. What an arrogant brat! Since you want to die so much, how can we not help you? The burly man suddenly shouted. His burly body was incomparably agile as he directly rushed towards Du Xiaofu. Attack together, and we'll split the benefits evenly. Someone from a tiny Yuqing Divine Kingdom dares to be so arrogant? Today I'll send you to your death. Kill him and take the lotus. As soon as the burly man made his move, even more experts moved as well. Dozens of figures rushed out, all of them rushing towards Du Xiaofu. Holy Sun, On the side of Huanchu Holy Land, a disciple went to Su Mo Yan's side. Just as he spoke half a sentence, he was interrupted. Don't worry, wait first. Su Mo Yan waved his hand and said softly. As for Qi Yuanlin and Lien Kaiyun, they also waved away the disciples beside them, preventing them from going forward to fight for the treasures. Let's see how strong he is first. I feel that this brat is very strange. He won't be easy to deal with. Qi Yuanlin muttered. Then, he calmed down and looked up at the sky. Obviously, it wasn't that the three Holy Lands didn't plan to make a move. Perhaps they just wanted to wait for the right time to act. With the people from the three sides added together, they accounted for 40% of the total number of people. Thus, at this time, there were over 60 figures rushing towards Du Xiaofu. Brother Du, we'll cover you. You go first. Xiaoyun said to Du Xiaofu as he led 7 disciples of the Qingtsang Holy Land forward. He was a little nervous. After all, there were too many opponents at this time. If he didn't retreat quickly, he was afraid that he would really end up in a bad situation. However, just as he said this, Du Xiaofu gently pulled Xiaoyun back and said, You guys don't need to make a move. I'll deal with it alone. After we've dealt with these cats and dogs, we'll divide the treasures. Xiaoyun was already injured and the others were also heavily injured. It wasn't good for them to continue fighting. What an arrogant brat. He actually wants to fight dozens of people alone. On the opposite side, the burly man had already closed in. When he heard Du Xiaofu's words, he couldn't help but sneer. The burly man was simply laughing in his heart. He actually met such a reckless brat who didn't care about life and death. How could he be so arrogant? Who did he think he was? How could he fight so many people at the complete true severing realm by himself? Not to mention him, even if Su Mo Yan, Qi Yuanlin, Lien Kaiyun, and Xiaoyun, the strongest holy sons and holy daughters, fought together, they would still be crushed to pieces. More than 60 true severing realm experts could even fight against a first sky of immortal realm expert. This brat is so arrogant that it makes one's hair stand on end. An expert sneered and rushed over at the same time. Facing the encirclement of these experts, Du Xiaofu didn't move at all. He even directly went up to them and took the initiative to fight. A blazing light rose from his body as the power of laws surged out. An invisible aura erupted from his body. Brother Du. Seeing the purple-robed young man rush out, Xiaoyun stretched out his hand and wanted to say something. However, he was stopped by Meng Dongyang. Holy Sun, don't worry. The Emperor God should be able to deal with this situation. Although his words were serious, there wasn't much of a sense of seriousness. That's right. Let the Emperor God fight alone. When he really needs our help, we'll go and help. Zhang Haoren also stepped forward and nodded. On the other side, Ting Yuanshan also nodded. They were very clear about Du Xiaofu's strength. When his space and matter laws reached the late stage of true severing realm, he could fight against the top 100 experts of Yuqing Divine Kingdom. Now, he had cultivated all 4 primal laws to perfection. Such a heaven-defying cultivation was absolutely unparalleled in this world. The 3 of them believed that even if there was a second sky of immortal realm expert here, His Majesty the Emperor God could deal with him. Even killing him wasn't impossible. Therefore, the 60 people in front of them were nothing to worry about. However, when Xiaoyun and the people of the Qingtsang Holy Land heard their words, they were dumbfounded. Is he really that strong? Xiaoyun frowned. He didn't dare to believe it at all. He turned his head and looked at Du Xiaofu with suspicion. He wanted to see the purple-robed young man's true strength. If it was really as Meng Dongyang and the other 2 had said, that he could fight dozens of true severing perfection experts by himself, then the gap between them would be too great. They would definitely not be on the same level. Where did they get their confidence from? The rest of the people of the Qingtsang Holy Land were also puzzled. Under the watchful eyes of these people, Du Xiaofu instantly collided with dozens of people. I'll use you guys to test my strength after my breakthrough. Du Xiaofu shouted and waved his arm. Boom, boom, boom. The 9 purple lightning profound cauldrons crushed the void and rushed into the crowd like 9 towering mountains. Then, an earth-shattering dragon roar came from his throat. His body changed in an instant. The second transformation of the green spirit armor was displayed. He turned into a huge green dragon, like a continuous mountain range in the void, rolling and twisting. Kill! The disciples of the major forces shouted one after another. Attacks that seemed to penetrate the heavens and the earth came down fiercely, forming a terrifying wave that surged towards Du Xiaofu. Everyone here was an expert, an existence that could suppress a region. Their attacks came at the same time, instantly turning the void into a chaotic state, a mess. Roar! Du Xiaofu let out a long roar. The 9 divine thunder cauldrons suppressed all directions, shattering the attacks into nothingness. Then, his dragon tail swept horizontally and vertically, directly striking the 2 figures, instantly sending them flying. After the breakthrough in cultivation, the second transformation of the green spirit armor, the green dragon body, was much stronger than before. It was not something that an ordinary true severing realm expert could contend against. The few people who were sent flying immediately paled. Although they didn't suffer any serious injuries because of their profound cultivation, they were still shocked and felt the blood in their bodies churning. After recovering slightly, they didn't hesitate and charged towards Du Xiaofu again. You do have some strength, but you still have to die. When the burly man saw this scene, his eyelids twitched unconsciously. After suppressing the shock in his heart, he gritted his teeth and said, he also came from a sacred ground. As a saint, his strength was naturally very strong. However, he knew that compared to what Du Xiaofu had just displayed, he was still too weak. Kill! I've never seen someone who can fight against dozens of people alone. A strong cultivator shouted coldly. Together with the others, they released a wave of law light and attacked fiercely. Almost all of the true Severing Realm experts here were disciples of sacred grounds. Every one of them was very terrifying. Among them, there were many saints and saintesses. Compared to people of the same cultivation level from small forces, their strength was much stronger. None of them could believe that the young Yu Qing Divine Emperor could really suppress everyone and defeat all of them. In a situation where their cultivation levels were similar, the saints and saintesses of the sacred grounds could almost represent the strongest true Severing Realm cultivators in the 33 heavens. Roar! Du Xiaofu didn't speak to these people. He only roared again and again. His dragon body tumbled and spun, shaking off the attacks of many powerhouses. In the sky, 9 divine thunder cauldrons rampaged, smashing the law light into pieces. After several rounds of fighting, at least 20 people were swept by the dragon tail, or smashed by the cauldrons. All of them were greatly shaken. At the same time, Du Xiaofu's dragon body also suffered several tyrannical attacks, causing cracks to appear. However, under the recovery of the indestructible Xian body, they quickly healed. For a time, a subtle balance appeared in the battle. Such a scene caused everyone to feel fear and trepidation. How can he be so strong? This is impossible. How can a true Severing Realm expert be so terrifying? This is too terrifying, this is too abnormal. The eyes of those from Huanchu Holy Land, Truyen Holy Land, and Mirror Moon Holy Land almost popped out of their sockets. They stared at the azure dragon dancing in the sky as if they were looking at a monster. The hearts of the 3 saints and saintesses were also thumping, as if they wanted to jump out of their throats. They found it hard to believe what they were seeing. The strength of the purple-robed youth was too shocking. A single person fighting against a group of heroes. If they hadn't seen it today, no matter how much they imagined it, they would never have believed that there was someone in the true Severing Realm who could be so terrifying. Chapter 2842. Brother Du is actually so abnormal. Xiaoyun's face froze as he looked at Meng Dongyang, Zhang Haoren, and Ting Yuanshan beside him. But when he looked at them, he was even more surprised to find that although the 3 of them had shock written all over their faces, their expressions were extremely calm. How could Xiaoyun not see through their thoughts? Needless to say, Du Xiaofu's performance was within their expectations. They were already mentally prepared and were not surprised at all. The Divine Emperor is indeed powerful. If he used his full strength, he would be able to wipe out these 60 people, Zhang Haoren muttered as he licked his lips. Ting Yuanshan and Meng Dongyang both nodded in agreement. They were very clear about Du Xiaofu's strength. If he used all 4 primordial laws at the same time, it would be an extremely frightening technique. The 3 of them guessed that even if he did not use the 9 purple lightning profound cauldrons and the azure dragon's body, he would be able to withstand the simultaneous attacks of these people with just the power of the 4 primordial laws. However, Zhang Haoren's words were like thunder in the ears of Xiao Yun and the other Qingtsang Holy Land disciples. Brother Du, he still hasn't used his full strength. Everyone felt confused. Their minds were in a mess and they could not figure out what was going on. The abnormal strength that Du Xiaofu had displayed was enough to make people unable to understand. However, these 3 people from the Yuqing Divine Kingdom still said that he had not used his full strength. What kind of concept was that? Didn't that mean that as long as Du Xiaofu wanted to, he could easily wipe out the joint forces of these experts? In other words, even if the 3 strongest holy lands joined the battle together, they still could not stop him? Xiao Yun felt that he had completely refreshed his understanding of the strength of the true Severing Realm. This was completely unimaginable. He looked at the battlefield in the sky again with a suspicious gaze. Du Xiaofu's azure dragon body flew up and down like a divine dragon dancing in the world. His strength was enough to uproot mountains and rivers, and his aura was unparalleled. The muscles all over his body were so tough that it made one's hair stand on end. Some of the weaker attacks could only create a series of sparks when they hit his body. They were unable to really hurt him. Even if some of the more powerful people were to blast the dragon with their powers, they would only be able to leave a few wounds on the dragon's body. However, the wounds would heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the 9 divine lightning cauldrons whistled through the sky as they charged horizontally and vertically. They shattered all obstructions and forcefully resisted the attacks of numerous experts. How can this brat be so strong? The burly man and the others were also incomparably shocked. Each and every one of them was horrified to the extreme. As the battle continued, everyone felt an immense pressure. The purple-robed youth had turned into an azure dragon. He was like a peerless demon king, extremely ferocious. It was only at this moment that these outstanding disciples from the various great powers finally put away their contempt. No one dared to shout that they would crush the young Yuqing Divine Emperor and take the lotus for themselves. Instead, these people were all fighting with all their might. Otherwise, the balance would be broken, and they might even be at a disadvantage. Roar! Du Xiaofu's dragon roars could be heard from his throat. They shattered the void and were mixed with terrifying spiritual energy. Everyone on the battlefield was shaken to the core. His body was bleeding profusely, and his dragon's scales were broken off. His skin was lacerated. However, he did not care about this at all. With his immense strength, he sent one expert after another flying. His gigantic dragon tail swayed left and right, blocking the attacks one after another. The island below had already collapsed. Rocks and debris flew through the sky as they were all destroyed. In the end, it was completely swallowed by the Blood Sea. In the primordial era, this place survived the terrifying war. However, it still could not escape the fate of destruction today. The 3 holy lands, Shaoyun, Mengdongyang, Zhanghaoren, and the others had already retreated far away. Otherwise, they would not be able to watch the battle in peace under the influence of the terrifying shockwaves. They might even be affected. Rumble! The terrifying battle continued. The void was overturning, the blood sea was surging, and the heavens were exploding. The boundless sea that was affected by the boundless blood sea was also shaken. The shackles in the air were broken, and waves of blood soared into the sky like the roars of giant beasts. Dozens of true Severing Perfection stage powerhouses were truly terrifying. The boundless blood sea was stirred up. The terrifying power of laws constantly shook, shuttling back and forth, slaughtering the world. The disciples of the various forces became more and more frightened as they fought. Many of them were already sweating profusely, and the pressure on them was even greater. Holy Sun, shouldn't we make a move? At this time, a disciple of the true Yen Holy Lands walked to Qi Yuanlin's side and softly asked. That Yu Qing Divine Emperor is indeed extraordinary, but that should be it. If we make a move, in addition to the Mirror Moon Holy Lands and the Huanchu Holy Lands, it shouldn't be difficult to take him down. Another person stepped forward and said, That's right. If this drags on, those 60 people will be injured. At that time, the situation will be even more disadvantageous for us. Another expert took a step forward and said solemnly, The true Yen Holy Lands had the intention of watching from the sidelines. They originally wanted to wait for Du Xiaofu to be suppressed by the other experts before making a move. However, the situation had completely defied their expectations. If they didn't make a move at this time, when the disciples of the various forces were injured, it would be difficult for them to hold the Yu Qing Divine Emperor back. Hearing the words of the crowd, Qi Yuanlin pondered for a moment before looking in the direction of the other two groups. He seemed to be asking for Su Mo Yen and Lien Saiyun's opinion. Su Mo Yen did not directly reply. Instead, he turned his head to look at Xiao Yun, Meng Dongyang and the rest. He saw that the expressions of the disciples of the Qing Tsang Holy Lands were no better than his own. However, the three from the Yu Qing Divine Kingdom were incomparably calm. This result caused Su Mo Yan's brows to furrow even more. After a long while, he slowly shook his head, indicating that he would not make a move for the time being. Yu Qing Divine Emperor, this person is too terrifying. We must not make him an enemy. Unless we have the confidence to kill him, if we let him escape, there will be endless trouble. Su Mo Yan's eyes were as deep as the sea as he thought to himself. What he had seen today had completely overturned his understanding. A true Severing Realm cultivator could actually be so powerful. Even in the entire 33 heavens, there was probably no other person like him. Such a terrifying existence could not be easily made an enemy unless one had the confidence to kill him today. How can a true Severing Realm cultivator be so powerful? Lien Kaiyun of the Mirror Moon Holy Lands was also looking at the scene with a burning gaze. She completely could not understand what was happening. Of course, if Du Xiaofu displayed the power of the four primal laws at the same time, she would be able to understand the reason behind it. However, it was clear that Du Xiaofu did not intend to do so. Facing the siege of more than 60 people, he only needed to rely on the law of matter, the law of space, the purple lightning dark cauldron, and the green spirit armor to defend himself. Moreover, as time passed, he would gradually gain the upper hand and suppress all the disciples of the other forces. Compared to Du Xiaofu's strength, if the strength of these disciples were to fight alone, they could only be considered as being unable to withstand a single blow. Although many ants could bite an elephant to death, if there were not enough ants, the final winner would definitely be the powerful elephant. It was obvious that the formation of more than 60 people was not at the level where they could exhaust Du Xiaofu to death. Rumble. In the sky above the Blood Sea, Du Xiaofu's dragon tail struck the void and swept in all directions, causing the sky to lose its color and the Blood Sea to boil. The 9 divine lightning cauldrons also charged forward with unparalleled ferocity. As time passed, the battle became more and more intense. The originally delicate balance was also gradually broken. Under the sweeping of Du Xiaofu's dragon tail, a young man who had just reached the complete stage of true severing stage was ruthlessly hit on the head. His body suddenly fell and directly smashed into the Blood Sea below. Then, he was instantly swallowed by the Blood Sea and turned into filthy blood. He couldn't be more dead. Such a scene caused many people's expressions to change. Du Xiaofu's strength was too strong. The Blood Sea was also very treacherous. If one was careless and was hit into the void, they would face the fate of death. Thinking of this, many people started to have thoughts of retreating. They did not want to continue fighting. With the young Yu Qing Divine Emperor's strength, those with weaker cultivations would find it difficult to fight against him. They did not have the confidence to control themselves and their bodies after being hit by the dragon tail, and not fall into the blood sea. Didn't you want to snatch the lotus? Whoever wants it, feel free to come up. Waves of resounding dragon roars came from Du Xiaofu's mouth. His voice rumbled like thunder. As soon as he finished speaking, he controlled 3 of the 9 purple lightning profound cauldrons and attacked one of the powerhouses at the same time. Puff! With a muffled sound, that expert's body was instantly smashed into pieces and turned into a cloud of blood mist. Then, he was sucked into the blood sea. This guy is too terrifying! Many experts who were besieging the Divine Emperor started to tremble. They felt cold all over. Du Xiaofu was too ferocious. His azure dragon body and the 9 terrifying cauldrons could be used to suppress all directions. Some people even felt that even an expert at the first sky of Immortal Realm could be easily killed by the Yuqing Divine Emperor. Kill! Du Xiaofu roared. His azure dragon body had suffered countless attacks. Blood dripped down, and one of his dragon horns had also been broken. However, such injuries couldn't cover the ferocious aura that burst out from his body. He really looked like a ferocious dragon that could dominate the world and crush all his enemies. Puff, puff, puff! No less than 10 experts were sent flying by him, vomiting blood. However, these people were lucky. They didn't fall into the blood sea and barely kept their lives. However, they were all seriously injured. How is this possible? How can he be so strong? The burly man who stood out first was stunned. He was a holy son of a holy land. Although he couldn't be compared to people like Su Mo Yen, Qi Yuanlin, Xiao Yun, and Lian Kaiyun, he wasn't too far off. However, at this moment, under the leadership of many holy sons and holy daughters who were as strong as him, more than 60 people were at a disadvantage. A dozen of them had already lost their ability to fight. Huff, huff, huff! While the burly man was still in shock, a purple thunder cauldron pressed down on his head. It was like an incomparably majestic mountain falling from the sky. His eyes narrowed fiercely. Without even thinking about it, the burly man stomped his feet, poured strength into his arms, and smashed out with his fist. The purple lightning profound cauldron was blasted flying with a loud bang, and the surrounding space was shaken into nothingness by this sound. However, just as the burly man finished doing all this and was about to take a breather, the alarm bell behind him rang loudly. A dragon tail whipped his back at an extremely tricky angle. That terrifying force invaded his body, instantly causing his chi to be thrown into chaos. Puff, puff! The burly man's body drew a straight line in the void. At the same time, he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. His entire body instantly became dispirited and weak to the extreme. Du Xiaofu didn't pay too much attention to this. His dragon eyes turned and looked at the remaining opponents. Roar! The azure dragon roared again and again, sweeping across the battlefield. The 9 cauldrons also went back and forth, crushing everything in their path. One had to admit that these disciples of the Holy Lands were really strong. The battle of more than 60 people lasted for half a day. In the end, Du Xiaofu's azure dragon body was covered in wounds and blood flowed out. Even the immortal Xian body's recovery speed was far from being able to keep up. However, the 60 people had also lost more than half of their strength. There were less than 20 people left who could barely continue to fight. However, gradually, they began to retreat and stay far away from Du Xiaofu. They didn't dare to get close to him. This Yuqing Divine Emperor is too terrifying. With such strength, he can already suppress an existence at the first sky of Immortal Realm. How can he be so terrifying? This doesn't make sense at all. No wonder he could become the Divine Emperor of a country at the true Severing Realm. With such heaven-defying talent and strength, any superpower in the 33 heavens would carefully nurture him. He's a one-of-a-kind existence. In the future, he will definitely be admired by everyone in the 33 heavens. These defeated people all exclaimed in their hearts. Although they were all heavily injured, no one was angry because of their injuries. Because they had lost to such a terrifying person. No one was unconvinced. These people were all thinking, how could someone at the true Severing Realm have such terrifying strength? but no one could figure out the crux of the matter. In fact, it wasn't that no one thought that Du Xiaofu had grasped all 4 primordial laws. However, they didn't want to believe this because it was almost impossible. Roar! When he saw everyone retreating, Du Xiaofu's dragon body rolled and twisted. His enormous dragon eyes looked at the surroundings in a domineering and absolute manner, causing all the experts to unconsciously take a few steps back. Their hearts were filled with panic, so how could anyone dare to step forward? As for those who were heavily injured, they hid even further away. They were only rejoicing that they had preserved their lives. Huanchu Holy Lands, Truyan Holy Lands, Mirror Moon Holy Lands, Qingtsang Holy Lands, the people from these 4 holy lands, as well as Mengdongyang, Zhanghaoren, and Tingyuanshan, all of them couldn't stop their hearts from fiercely beating. A single person suppressing over 60 powerhouses at the same boundary. With such strength, who in the 33 heavens can compare to him? They all mumbled to themselves. Their hearts were filled with endless shock. At this moment, in the eyes of all of these powerhouses, Du Xiaofu already stood at the peak of the true severing realm. Moreover, he had cast everyone far, far away, overlooking all of his peers. Even those that had just entered the immortal realm couldn't compare with him. With such strength, he reigned supreme in this world. Whether it was the 60+ people that had just attacked, or the 3 holy lands that hadn't attacked yet, or even those from Qingtsang Holy Lands that had friendly relations with Du Xiaofu, all of them looked at the azure dragon in the air with awe and respect in their eyes. This was awe towards the strong. In this world, strength represented everything. At this time, no one dared to make a request to divide the lotus. For a time, the atmosphere in this space became extremely strange. Everyone looked at Du Xiaofu with reverence and respect. No one spoke to break the silence. As for Du Xiaofu, he slowly closed his dragon eyes and began to adjust his breathing, restoring his strength. He had also been heavily wounded. In order to hide a certain amount of his strength, he hadn't used all 4 of his primal laws. This was in order to prevent the 3 holy lands from suddenly attacking him. Du Xiaofu didn't believe that the 3 holy sons and holy daughters would be so kind as to allow him to safely obtain the lotus. Their plan was nothing more than the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the Oreo behind. In the field, all that was left was the billowing sea of blood. Terrifying waves of blood rose up, shaking the highest heavens. However, it was in this strange silence that a sinister voice suddenly rang out. The words that followed were filled with extreme disdain and contempt. Kikik, so the so-called outstanding disciples of the 35 holy lands and 72 divine kingdoms are all so weak. Dozens of people joining forces, but they can't even contend against a single Du Xiaofu. What a bunch of trash! The person who spoke immediately scolded all the factions of the transcendent Changrong heaven. After being ruthlessly abused by Du Xiaofu, everyone's expressions instantly turned ugly. This was a blatant slap to the face. Not only the dozens of people who had attacked, but even the 3 holy lands who had been watching from the sidelines were not let off. Almost simultaneously, everyone cast their gazes towards the source of the voice. They were truly unable to imagine which power in the Fiend God battlefield actually had the guts to provoke all 35 holy lands and 72 divine kingdoms. Could it be that the other party didn't know that the people here were all the strongest disciples of the various factions? Could it be that he wanted to become enemies with the entire transcendent Changrong heaven? It's him. As soon as that voice rang out, Du Xiaofu, who had been adjusting his breathing with his eyes closed, opened his eyes with a whoosh. Following that, they fiercely narrowed, emitting a bright light. This voice was too familiar, and it instantly tugged at his heartstrings. Some people and matters from many years ago instantly surfaced in his mind. Chapter 2843. Du Xiaofu and the rest of the powerhouses looked over and saw a ripple in the void not far away. Then, a young man in a blood-red robe walked out from the void. Red mist filled the sky and quickly condensed into a black-robed figure. The 2 people who had appeared were both young men. They were tall and slender, and they were extremely handsome. However, there was an endless murderous aura between their brows. Their bodies were also filled with a dark aura that was extremely terrifying. Although the two people's auras were extremely bloody and murderous, their auras were rather obscure. It was difficult to see their specific cultivation levels. However, it was not difficult to sense that they were extremely powerful. "Who are you? How dare you speak so rudely? Do you want to become enemies with the entire Supreme Changrong Heaven?" At this moment, a Holy Land disciple jumped out and pointed at the two people who had appeared and scolded them. Many people glared at the two young men and glared at them fiercely. Needless to say, the person who had mocked them was one of the two. These Holy Land disciples had received countless preferential treatment in the past. No matter where they went, they were respected by countless people. However, today, these two young men who had appeared out of nowhere took the opportunity to mock them while they were being suppressed by Du Xiaofu. This was intolerable. In the 33 heavens, how many people dared to curse the entire Supreme Changrong Heaven? Humph! You're just one of the 33 heavens, the Supreme Changrong Heaven. With your strength, what can you do to the two of us? The young man in the blood-red robes sneered and sneered again. You're really arrogant. You're so arrogant. Do you want to fight? These words caused the flames of rage in the hearts of all the young experts in the surroundings to burn even more brightly. Many of them stepped forward and shouted loudly with the intention of fighting. Since they were in the Divine Devil battlefield, it meant that they were also at the true severing stage. There were many disciples gathered here. It would be easy for them to crush the two of them. It was impossible for all of them to be as powerful as the young Yuqing Divine Emperor. You can't even defeat Du Xiaofu, and you want to suppress the two of us? You're overestimating yourselves. The black-robed young man beside the young man in the blood-red robe said. Suddenly, a terrifying aura of murderous intent rose from his body. It was as unfathomable as the sea. It was precisely such an imposing aura that suddenly charged out like a muddy wave piercing through the sky and striking the shore, and it emitted the roar of a flood as it swept towards the numerous young experts. Instantly it overturned the surroundings, and they were utterly unable to resist it. An immortal! Soon, someone recognized the black-robed young man's strength and couldn't help but exclaim in shock. How can there be an immortal powerhouses in the Divine Devil battlefield? Everyone's eyes turned serious. They found it hard to believe. They hadn't been here for a long time. Only a few years had passed, and they were all extremely young experts in the Divine Demon battle realm. It was almost impossible for them to break through from the truth-severing stage to the immortal realm in such a short time. But why did the black-robed young man do it? The disciples of the various powerhouses couldn't understand. Dongli Qiwang, Xinyan, long time no see! While everyone was still in shock, Du Xiaofu opened his mouth. He gently took a few steps in the void and said faintly, "That's right." The young man in the blood-red robe and the black-robed young man were Du Xiaofu's old acquaintances in the divine martial world. They were Dongli Qiwang from the Divine Light Court and Xinyan from the Black Talisman sect. They had a deep grudge with Du Xiaofu. Back then, Du Xiaofu had left the ancient Desolation continent and rushed back to the desolate country. He met them on the way. Just as he was about to kill them, Jiangchen suddenly appeared and begged him to spare their lives. Since then, Du Xiaofu had never seen Dongli Qiwang or Xingyan again. He'd never seen Jiangchen. However, after the devil religion's calamity in the divine martial world ended, Du Xiaofu woke up from his stone coffin. His father, Du Tingxian, and the others had told him that after the demon god died, he tried to resurrect himself. In the end, Jiangchen had suddenly appeared and ended the demon god's life. Only then did the calamity truly end. When Jiangchen appeared, Dongli Qiwang and Xinyan had followed him. Their strength had become extremely terrifying, and they'd crushed several Sky Sage Realm demon emperors. After dealing with the demon god and the demon emperors, Jiangchen had left with the two of them and disappeared without a trace. Since then, the experts of the desolate country and the 3 continents, Kyushu, and the other realms had tried to figure out Jiangchen's background, but to no avail. Du Xiaofu had once wondered if he'd see Jiangchen again in the 33 heavens. He'd had a close friendship with Jiangchen in the past, and he'd contributed greatly in dealing with the demon god. To his surprise, he'd run into Dongli Qihuang and Xingyan here today. Moreover, Du Xiaofu had observed that not only Xingyan, but even Qi Li and Qi Huang had reached the first heavenly layer of Immortal Realm. It could be said that they'd advanced at lightning speed. Kakik! Du Xiaofu, it's indeed been a long time. Dongli Qihuang narrowed his eyes and let out a sinister laugh that sent chills down one's spine. When he looked at Du Xiaofu, he didn't look like an old friend at all. Instead, he looked at him with intense hostility. Why are you in the Fiend God battlefield? Where's Jiangchen? Du Xiaofu asked with a frown. Many years had passed since then, and he didn't want to bring up the past again. Coincidentally, Dongli Qihuang and Xingyan were Jiangchen's subordinates. He didn't want to bring up the past with them either. However, when he saw Dongli Qihuang's undisguised hostility, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but feel displeased. Kakik! Du Xiaofu, the two of us appeared in the Fiend God battlefield because of you. Dongli Qihuang laughed strangely and replied, Besides, you're not qualified to ask about my lord's affairs. He looked at Du Xiaofu, his eyes filled with endless coldness. So the Yuqing Divine Emperor knows these two. They don't seem to be on good terms. They must be enemies. Immortal Realm experts have entered the Fiend God battlefield for the Yuqing Divine Emperor. I wonder what they're up to. The young experts of Transcendent Changrong Heaven began to discuss among themselves, trying to figure out the relationship. Since they're here for the Yuqing Divine Emperor, let's just wait and see. Everyone had the same thought. They didn't want to get involved. Immortal Realm experts made them all fearful. Most of them were heavily injured. They'd used up a lot of energy in their fight with Du Xiaofu. If they went up against an Immortal Realm expert, they wouldn't be in a good situation. Most importantly, the other blood-robed youth was likely an Immortal Realm expert as well. That made 2 Immortal Realm experts, which was more than enough to wipe them all out. They just didn't know if the Yuqing Divine Emperor could defeat one of them. At this moment, the experts of the various factions were wondering if they'd have a chance to obtain the Lotus Treasure after the 2 Immortal Realm experts killed Du Xiaofu. They're here for me. When he heard Dongli Qihuang's words, Du Xiaofu's eyes narrowed. Could it be that you want to kill me because of old grudges? His words were filled with coldness as he stared at the 2 of them without flinching. Kiki, you're only half right. The 2 of us don't care about old grudges at all. However, we've indeed come to the Fiend God battlefield to kill you. Xingyan took a step forward and stared intently at Du Xiaofu. Could it be that Jiangchen sent you here? Du Xiaofu's heart began to race as he asked. He couldn't believe his own judgment. He and Jiangchen were close friends and had fought side by side. Moreover, Jiangchen had no reason to kill him. However, Dongli Qihuang and Xingyan were Jiangchen's subordinates. Without his permission, how could they dare to kill him? Humph! If His Excellency wanted to kill you, then even if you had 10,000 lives, Du Xiaofu, you would have died a graveless death a long time ago. Xingyan grunted coldly and continued. His Excellency doesn't want to kill you because of old ties, but the 2 of us will definitely take your life. There's no need to waste our breath. Let's end everything here today. From today onward, Du Xiaofu is no more. He took a step forward while his aura surged, and it instantly filled the air and rose without end. Such a terrifying aura caused Du Xiaofu's eyes to raise fiercely. Qin Yan's aura actually carried the fluctuations of both the laws of soul and the laws of matter. He stepped into the eternal realm with 2 primordial laws. His strength is actually so terrifying. Who exactly are they? How could their strength be so terrifying? It wasn't just Du Xiaofu who was shocked, all the other experts were extremely astounded as well. Surpassing the eternal realm with 2 primordial laws wasn't something that didn't exist in the world, but it was absolutely rare, and every single one of them was an existence that was difficult to find in the world. Previously, they had already seen Du Xiaofu use the 2 great primitive regulations of space and matter, but he was only in the true severing tier, so whether he could use the power of these two great regulations to reach the immortal level in the end was still difficult to predict. But now, that young man called Qinyan was a true expert of this type. Du Xiaofu, prepare to be beheaded. Dongli Qiwang spoke as well. A layer of waves of blood surged out from his body, and they danced and twisted high in the sky before transforming into an enormous dragon that emanated red light. This dragon emanated a murderous and terrifying aura that shook the heavens and the earth, and it caused the eyes of everyone to move. The disciples of numerous great powers couldn't help but retreat and didn't dare approach it. At the same time, all the experts were shocked once more. Two primordial laws again. Who exactly are they? Under people's observation, they found that the murderous and murderous aura contained the two supreme powers of the law of soul and the law of matter. Moreover, they had fused together to some extent. It was intimidating. Today, two of such formidable experts had appeared at the same time. You've both reached this realm. Seems like your situation isn't ordinary. Du Xiaofu's face became stern. Although Dongli Qiwang and Qinyan had just reached the first sky of immortal realm, they each had two primordial laws. The competence they could display was absolutely intimidating. Today, Du Xiaofu was confident that he wouldn't fall into a disadvantageous position when facing a second sky of immortal realm expert. However, Dongli Qiwang and Qinyan's combined competence wasn't weaker than a second sky of immortal realm expert. Perhaps, they were even stronger than a second sky of immortal realm expert. They were absolutely intimidating. It's troublesome. I'm not sure if the Divine Emperor can resist them. He's just gone through a battle. He must have consumed a lot of energy. If he faces two immortal realm experts now, I'm afraid it'll be very dangerous. We can't help much in a battle at this level. When the immortal realm experts take action, even if it's just the aftermath, it's not something we can endure. Meng Dongyang, Ting Yuanshan, and Zhang Haoren all wore solemn faces. They were worried about Du Xiaofu. The two young men's competence was frightening. The three of them couldn't help. If they rashly went up, they would only be courting death. Although Brother Du has just reached the complete true severing realm, his competence isn't bad. He should be able to resist for a while. We should stay put and act according to the situation. Xiao Yun was also worried. He said to Ting Yuanshan and the other two in a low voice, Du Xiaofu, go to hell. Kill. Qinyan didn't say anything else. His figure suddenly dashed out. Layers of terrifying power of laws rose from his body, affecting the entire space around him. The law of the soul vibrated, causing the many true severing realm experts in the surroundings to feel dazed. They almost couldn't stand still, and the vitality in their bodies was rapidly draining away. In the face of such a terrifying scene, no one dared to stay in the center. They quickly retreated into the distance, trembling with fear. Kill. The Eastern mythical Scarlet Phoenix also roared. The blood-red dragon's body stretched across the void, crushing the space and turning it into chaos. The dragon's tail swept across the sky, shaking the 9 heavens and 10 earths as it swept towards Du Xiaofu. If you want to kill me, then let's see if you too have the ability. I was able to suppress you time and time again in the past, and I can do the same today. Du Xiaofu's voice sank. Since this battle was unavoidable, then he might as well fight to his heart's content. As for what had happened between Dongli Qiwang, Qinyan, and Jiangchen, there was no need to pay attention to it. When it came to people who wanted to kill him, he could only suppress them. Roar! As soon as Du Xiaofu finished speaking, another dragon's roar erupted from his throat. The second transformation of the Azure Spirit armor was unleashed, and the Azure Dragon's body danced in the air. At the same time, the 9 divine lightning cauldrons circled around his dragon body, smashing terrifying black holes into the void. Buzz buzz. Du Xiaofu's pair of dragon claws continued to form hand seals. Accompanied by a bright flash of light, a huge 8 trigrams diagram appeared in the void, occupying the sky above. Under this 8 trigrams, bolts of lightning wantonly streaked across the sky. Torrents of water flooded the 9 heavens, raging flames burned fiercely, and gusts of wind howled, The 9 heavens were evolving, and the thick earth was trembling. Layers of mysterious power constantly intertwined, coiling around each other and evolving into the myriad of things in the world. Under the cover of Du Xiaofu's 8 trigrams, the law of matter gave birth to various physical forms, the law of space formed a unique domain, and the law of soul endowed countless objects with life, as if they had come alive. This special area actually had the flow of time, and it was incompatible with the outside world, as if it was independent of this world. Du Xiaofu's first attack was his strongest attack. The 4 ancient laws all rose into the sky, and it was incomparably terrifying. Everything in this world was hiding an incomparably terrifying explosive power. The Azure Dragon was the ruler of this space, and the 9 purple lightning cauldrons were even more like world-suppressing objects. In the distance, dozens of young disciples saw this scene, and their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. They all looked in the direction of Du Xiaofu with incomparable shock. That you Qing Divine Emperor, actually, mastered all 4 ancient laws. Impossible. How is this possible? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. How can someone in this world master all 4 ancient laws? An expert mumbled. His throat moved up and down as he swallowed his saliva, and he couldn't even speak properly. They had received too much shock today, and it had simply overturned everything they knew. Du Xiaofu's terror had refreshed everyone's imagination time and time again. No one dared to believe all of this. They all felt that it was too illusory, and not real at all. However, they had seen Du Xiaofu's performance with their own eyes. The power of the 4 ancient laws was magnificent, and no one could deny it. No one knew what to think anymore. They only felt that their heads were numb, and their minds were filled with shock. With this kind of strength, he can even fight against an expert of the second sky of Immortal Realm. Su Emoyen, Lian Kaiyun, Qi Yuanlin, and Xiao Yun's faces were stiff. They looked at each other, and thought in their hearts. They didn't doubt that if Du Xiaofu hadn't held back a portion of his strength, even if the 3 strongest holy lands joined forces, they wouldn't be able to stop him. This young man was really too abnormal. If such a terrifying matter were to spread to the 33 heavens, it would definitely set off terrifying waves and shock the world. I just don't know if Brother Du can contend against those 2 young experts. After a long time, Xiaoyun gradually calmed down from the shock in his heart and thought. Those 2 young people were also very terrifying. They had grasped the power of the 2 ancient laws of matter and soul. If they fought with Du Xiaofu, it would probably be a fierce battle. Xiaoyun couldn't predict the result. The 3 of them were rare experts in this world, but Du Xiaofu's disadvantage in terms of realm was very obvious. It wouldn't be easy for him to resist. This is the first time His Majesty has used the 4 ancient laws at the same time after breaking through to the complete true severing stage. I wonder what kind of combat strength he will have. Ting Yuanshan, Zhang Haoren, and Meng Dongyang all thought in their hearts. Because they had already been shocked by Du Xiaofu, their emotions were the calmest out of everyone. They were looking forward to Du Xiaofu's battle, but at the same time, they were worried for him. After all, the enemy he had to face was also terrifying. Brother Du, do your best. Xiaoyun clenched his fists and secretly cheered for Du Xiaofu, hoping that he could resist. Chapter 2844. While people were still in shock, Du Xiaofu, Dongli Qihuang, and Xinyan had already collided. Rumble! The divine thunder cauldrons roared and swayed in the sky like 9 mountains. They attacked the 2 of them one after another. Their brutal power burst out as if it could destroy the world. The void was pierced, and many terrifying black holes appeared. Clang! 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 However, Dongli Qihuang and Xinyan were too strong. They both had 2 complete primordial principles. Moreover, their cultivation bases were at the first sky of Immortal Realm. They had already fused a small part of the principles. The 2 of them kept waving their hands and easily slapped the divine thunder cauldrons away, making loud noises. The two of them moved casually while walking in the void. They were extremely indifferent, which showed their formidable power. This scene made Du Xiaofu's eyes tremble. When he was facing the first sky of Immortal Realm expert of the sky-swallowing demonic wolf clan in the Jinghua sky of Gansu, the 9 purple thunder cauldrons were easily blocked. At that time, he was only at the late stage of true severing realm. Moreover, he had only reached the late stage of matter and space principles. Today, he had made a big breakthrough in the 4 great primordial principles. His power wasn't the same as before. Even if he faced the second sky of Immortal Realm expert, he wasn't afraid. However, since Dongli Qiwang and Xinyan had 2 primordial principles, it would be a bloody battle. It wouldn't be less difficult than the battle with the first sky of Immortal Realm expert. If they were careless, their lives would be in danger. Du Xiaofu, you've always been much stronger than us. But now, things have changed. We're not the same as before. As Xinyan spoke, he suddenly stretched out his slender palm and slapped it lightly towards the space before him. Rumble! A terrifying light screen burst out from his palm and spread rapidly. Then, it turned into a terrifying wall of light. It was thick and solid and moved toward Du Xiaofu. This wall of light was condensed from the laws of matter and flowed with the runes of the laws. It was like the most powerful treasure in the world, and just by standing there, it gave off an indestructible feeling. Within the wall of light, the power of laws that couldn't be seen with the naked eye flowed, wrapping around it and intimidating one's divine soul. This was the power of the law of the soul, and it was madly devouring the vitality and life energy in the world. Dang, dang, dang. At this time, the 9 purple lightning profound cauldrons were still suppressing the sky and smashing down again and again. However, when it smashed into the light wall, it only caused it to tremble. It did not cause the light wall to collapse. Rumble! The light wall seemed slow, but it was actually extremely fast. In an instant, it reached Du Xiaofu's side and directly imprinted itself on the world under the void 8 trigrams. Buzz! The moment the two came into contact, a fierce buzzing sound spread out, and the entire world seemed to be turned upside down. The collision produced terrifying ripples that destroyed all obstacles, stirring up the sea of blood below, and huge waves surged into the 9 heavens. Du Xiaofu's world form was bombarded until it trembled incessantly, as if it was being shaken by an invisible hand. The light wall and the world form squeezed each other, and energy surged out like seawater, shaking the sky and earth. In the end, the light wall exploded amidst the huge tremors, and pieces of law runes shot out in all directions. The independent world that Du Xiaofu constructed with the 4 primeval laws cracked, but strangely, it did not explode. This kind of scene surprised the 3 people in the battle. Could it be because the 4 primeval laws were activated at the same time? Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows, feeling very pleasantly surprised. In terms of cultivation, Xinyan was much higher than him, isolating him by a major realm. At the same time, the other party also grasped 2 kinds of primeval laws. His strength could not be underestimated. In a normal collision, not to say that he would be defeated immediately, but it would absolutely not be easy either. What he did not expect was that his world form actually resisted. Du Xiaofu felt that this might have something to do with the 4 primeval laws being displayed at the same time. This kid is getting more and more strange. Xinyan's eyes moved, feeling extremely surprised in his heart. In fact, when Du Xiaofu displayed the power of the 4 primeval laws previously, it already shocked him. This kid's performance was unimaginable, exceeding his understanding. Du Xiaofu, go to hell! Du Xiaofu and Dongli Qiwang did not have time to think too much when Dongli Qiwang on the other side shouted coldly and attacked at the same time. Roar! Under his control, that blood-colored enormous dragon soared through the sky, carrying a power that could suppress the world, and directly collided with the world form outside Du Xiaofu's body. Voila! Finally, the heavenly lightning, earthly fire, earth, mountains, lakes, seas, rivers, and so on immediately exploded. At the same time, that blood-colored enormous dragon also turned into powder. Aftershocks lingered for a long time without end. This kind of collision was too terrifying. Both sides were shaken, flying back, their figures floating all the way 1,000,000 kilometers away before stopping. All the energy in Du Xiaofu's surroundings shattered, leaving only that void 8 trigrams diagram above his head still spiraling. Both Dongli Qiwang and Qingyan were slightly shaken, but it wasn't serious. Their cultivations were deep, and they merely circulated the energy within their bodies to easily suppress everything. This kid is actually so strong! Xinyan's gaze flickered nonstop, looking at Du Xiaofu in the distant sky, feeling very surprised in his heart. Didn't you guys want to kill me? Come on! Du Xiaofu shouted in a deep voice, and the azure dragon's enormous mouth let out a terrifying dragon roar, shaking heaven and earth, breaking the void with its roar. He flew out again, pouncing towards the two people over there. Kill! You must die today! Dongli Qiwang shouted coldly. His blood-red robe flapped, and a large expanse of red clouds appeared in the sky. They were stirred up by him, rolling and suppressing the world. No matter how heaven-defying you are, you're still only at the true severing realm in the end. How can you fight against the two of us? Qingyan spoke coldly as well. Expanses of pitch-black mist rose from his entire body and surged through space. Wherever the pitch-black aura came into contact with, everything would turn into chaos without a sound. Such a scene caused many young experts who were watching from afar to be aghast in an instant. Demonic Qi! They're demons! Those two are actually demons! There are actually such powerful remnants of demons in the Fiend God Battle Realm! What a terrifying demon! It's only the Yu Qing Divine Emperor. If it was an ordinary demon, only death would await them. Everyone discovered that Xinyan's aura contained the unique aura of the demon race. No matter how the beings of the 33 heavens tried to imitate it, they couldn't reach such a terrifying level. The true experts of the demon race have appeared. For us, this is a real challenge. The holy son of Huanchu Holy Lands, Su Mo Yen, said softly. A strange light flashed in his eyes. Should we attack? An expert asked the various holy sons and holy daughters, wanting to hear their opinions. For the beings of the 33 heavens, the demon race and the other races were mortal enemies. They were the common enemy of all beings. If you don't die, then I die. There was no third possibility. Now that the two demons had appeared here, they were considering whether or not to help the young Yu Qing Divine Emperor. The Yu Qing Divine Emperor can still fight. His strength is extraordinary. Let's wait and see. When it's time to attack, don't hesitate. Otherwise, with our strength, without the deterrence of the Yu Qing Divine Emperor, it will be too difficult to deal with these two. The holy son of Truyan Holy Lands, Qi Yuanlin, said to the people around him. When everyone heard this, they all nodded in agreement. The two demons were too strong. If they attacked now, the risk was too great. And Du Xiaofu had the strength to contend with the two demons. They might as well wait and see how the situation developed. When the right opportunity appeared, they would immediately attack and help him suppress the demons. Void 8 trigrams, condense for me! In the distant sky, Du Xiaofu rushed forward. He controlled the 8 trigrams in the void and crazily rotated. The power of the 4 primal laws emitted a terrifying vibration. The 8 trigrams rotated into an illusory image, releasing a bright light. Under the evolution of this light, the shape of an independent world was born once again. Everything appeared, the heavens and the earth were present. The laws were evolving, the order was weaving, and a world-destroying power was emitted from it. Kill! Outside Qingyan's body, the billowing demonic qi started to churn endlessly. It kept expanding like a black cloud in the sky. When this huge black cloud expanded to its limit, it suddenly shrank back and pounced on Qingyan like a swarm of bees returning to their nest. When the last black cloud disappeared, Qingyan's body became 100,000 feet tall. His face was ferocious, and his entire body was filled with a ferocious aura. He was like a giant that could support the heavens and the earth. It was completely different from his normal form. Whoosh whoosh! Qingyan waved his hand, and a huge palm shot out and stirred up the heavens and the earth. Everywhere it passed, a large area turned into chaos. The boundless sea of blood below was also churning endlessly. It was swept away by the aura that was expelled from the sky, and the blood in the depths was revealed. Du Xiaofu, die! At the same time, Dongli Qiwang shouted. He swept through the red clouds that covered the sky, and he was like a ferocious god that had emerged into the world. He was filled with boundless blood, and a ferocious and bloody aura accompanied him. The terrifying red clouds pressed down like a terrifying lid, and it directly smashed down. Even Du Xiaofu's 8 trigrams and azure dragon form were enveloped within it. Rumble! The heavens and the earth ceaselessly shook, and merely this sort of enormous shaking caused expanses of space to collapse and collapse. Clang! 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 The 9 divine lightning cauldrons smashed successively onto Qingyan's palm, yet they were slapped flying in succession. These 9 cauldrons were extraordinary treasures. Even if they suffered a terrifying and heavy strike, there weren't any cracks on them. However, Du Xiaofu's current cultivation wasn't deep enough, so he was unable to exert the might they possessed. Du Xiaofu, die! After he slapped the 9 divine lightning cauldrons flying, Qingyan's palm continued descending and collided once more with the form of the world outside Du Xiaofu's body. The enormous palm was blasted flying, and even Qingyan's body was blasted flying. At the same time, Du Xiaofu felt a wave of surging within his body. The shaking was too terrifying. Even the 8 trigrams in the sky were shaking without end, and the world Dharma idol around him was on the verge of collapse. However, most of the force was forcefully endured by his azure dragon form. Even though he was injured, it wasn't serious. Let me see how you'll be able to avoid death today. These words came out of Dongli Qihuang's mouth, and the boundless red clouds descended while Du Xiaofu was shaken, and it was like an expanse of the blue sky that pressed down. Finally, the world Dharma idol around Du Xiaofu was unable to endure this terrifying force any longer, and it shattered with a bang. Pff! A mouthful of blood sprayed out, and Du Xiaofu gritted his teeth and hissed. You want to suppress me? All of you aren't enough! As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't dodge, and he directly brought the 8 trigrams up into the sky to meet the boundless red clouds formed by Dongli Qiwang. Void 8 trigrams, rise! Du Xiaofu shouted loudly, and it transformed into waves of dragon roars. The 8 trigrams in the sky spun faster and faster, and it emitted whistling sounds as it brazenly collided with the red clouds that were like a pot lid. Boom! 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 A series of mighty explosions resounded, and the 8 trigrams in the sky was like a millstone that obliterated most of the red clouds. However, the red clouds were powerful as well. They contained a portion of the laws of matter and the laws of soul, and their destructive force was unparalleled. It didn't take long for the entire 8 trigrams in the sky to be ground into nothingness. When Dongli Qihuang's remaining strength continued to press down, Du Xiaofu's body shook the 9 heavens while the azure dragon's body ceaselessly spun, and it slapped the red clouds into pieces. Du Xiaofu, I'll send you to hell today! Qingyan attacked once more. Suddenly, a sword that flickered with black light had appeared in his hand, and it swept horizontally through the sky. It was a few tens of thousands of kilometers long, and it seemed capable of splitting the heavens and the earth apart. It was precisely such a peerlessly ferocious sword that was swept out towards Du Xiaofu. Die! A savage smile arose on the corners of Qingyan's mouth. Under his gaze, Du Xiaofu had already suffered a heavy injury at this moment. The azure dragon's body was covered in terrifying injuries, and all of them reached the bone. Blood sprayed ceaselessly from them, and his aura had weakened greatly. Qingyan was confident that so long as this sword slashed down, then Du Xiaofu would definitely be unable to turn the situation around, and all that remained was to crush Du Xiaofu. He's fused with part of the power of the ancient laws. So terrifying! Facing Qingyan's attack, Du Xiaofu's dragon eyes showed extreme seriousness. He had tried to break through to the immortal realm before, but it had ended in failure. It was really too difficult to break through all 4 ancient laws at the same time. So now, the gap between him and Dongli Qiwang and Qinyan was too big. If it were an ordinary expert at first sky of Immortal Realm, he was sure that he could defeat him. Moreover, he didn't need to use all of his energy to kill him. At least, it was much easier than killing the expert of the sky-swallowing demonic wolf clan. However, the 2 opponents in front of him had mastered 2 ancient laws, which made it very strenuous for him to resist. After just a few rounds of fighting, he had fallen into an absolute disadvantage. How can I break through and reach the Immortal Realm when I cultivate all 4 ancient laws at the same time? Du Xiaofu couldn't help but start to think. He didn't know how to do it, and there was no example from the predecessors, which made him feel helpless. In fact, if he wanted to, he could give up 2 or even 3 ancient laws. That way, it would be much easier to break through to the Immortal Realm. However, this was the path he had chosen. No matter what, Du Xiaofu wouldn't give it up easily. The 8 diagrams of the void is a technique taught by the master of the 3,000 worlds. It can include all the laws in this world. Du Xiaofu's mind moved like lightning, and various ideas flashed through his mind. The 4 ancient laws of time, space, matter, and soul can all be combined into one with this 8 diagrams of the void, which will make their power stronger. Facing Qinyan's attack, he seemed to have forgotten to resist, but his heart was surprisingly calm. Since it's like this, if I want to break through all 4 ancient laws at the same time, can I use the 8 diagrams of the void to do it? This idea made Du Xiaofu's eyelids twitch, and he couldn't help but feel a little excited. The more he thought about it, the more he felt this method was extremely feasible. The 8 diagrams of the void could carry all the laws in the world. Time, space, matter, and soul could all be contained within it. If he relied on this principle to complete a further fusion, then wouldn't it mean that he could use it to make a further breakthrough? The Grand Tao transforms into yin and yang. Yin and yang give birth to the 4 diagrams, and the 4 diagrams form the 8 diagrams. If the 8 diagrams want to fuse, then it's to stride towards the 4 diagrams. The 4 diagrams are divided into the Great Yin, Great Yang, Minor Yin, and Minor Yang. Correspondingly, the Great Yin is the time law, the Great Yang is the matter law, the Minor Yin is the soul law, and the Minor Yang is the space law. Various thoughts ceaselessly emerged in Du Xiaofu's mind, and he analyzed the connection between the 4 ancient laws and the 8 diagrams of the void. The time law was the most profound and profound. It existed yet was completely unfathomable, and it was the Great Yin law. The matter law developed everything in the world, and it was the existence of all the phenomena in the world. It could be seen, heard, and touched, and it was the sun. The soul or the life law was the foundation of all life, and it was profound and unfathomable. It was the Minor Yin law. The space law carried all matter, and it was the foundation of the boundless world. It was the Minor Yang law. Such a division just happened to coincide with the principle of the 4 diagrams. Hee. You're still lost in thought at a time like this. Could it be that you've given up on resisting? As he looked at Du Xiaofu, who seemed to have fallen into deep thought, the corners of Qinyan's mouth couldn't help but curl up into a ghastly smile. The speed of the pitch-black sword in his hand increased slightly once more. Then I'll send you to hell. From today onwards you, Du Xiaofu, cease to exist in this world. The force of this sword strike was extremely great, and it tore the heavens and the earth apart. It instantly split the heavens and the earth in this area into 2. The sky was rising, and the sea of blood below was sinking. A terrifying and boundlessly wide rift lay across the sky, and it swiftly extended towards Du Xiaofu and swiftly swept towards his azure dragon body. Looks like he's really given up on resisting. High above in the sky, Dongli Qiwang laughed coldly without end. When he saw that Du Xiaofu didn't have the slightest intention of returning to his senses, boundless joy couldn't help but arise in his heart. Was this brat finally going to die here today? Chapter 2845. At the same time that Du Xiaofu was lost in thought during the battle of life and death, It caused Dongli Qiwang and Xinyan to be surprised, and at the same time, a savage and cold smile arose on their faces. They were determined to kill this brat. It wasn't because of the grudge they had in Shenwu world. It was because Du Xiaofu's existence would be a huge obstacle to the rise of the demon race. Therefore, even if their master had a close relationship with this brat and was unwilling to kill him personally, as his subordinates, Dongli Qiwang and Xinyan were duty-bound. For the sake of the demon race, they were willing to be punished. Yu Qing Divine Emperor, what's wrong? Why aren't you resisting? Hurry up and attack. It'll be too late. Yu Qing Divine Emperor, why are you in a daze? Extremely far away, the disciples of the various major forces also had their hearts in their throats. They looked into the distance and began to worry for Du Xiaofu. Their palms were sweating. Many people were screaming in their hearts, hoping that the Yu Qing Divine Emperor would come back to his senses and block the demon race's killing blow. Otherwise, the gigantic azure dragon's body would be cut in half like the entire world. The disciples of the various factions didn't want to see such a scene. Saint, let's attack! An expert hurried to the side of the saint and said. Anyone was able to discern exactly how terrifying the might of the sword in the hand of the giant Xinyan had transformed into was. It's too late. The saint let out a long sigh. Even if all the experts attacked now, they wouldn't be able to save Du Xiaofu. The sword was too domineering and too fast. It had already reached the azure dragon's body. Moreover, the two demon race experts were too terrifying. If they attacked now, they would be courting death. Under everyone's shocked gazes, a peerless light exploded and slashed down. Pfft! Du Xiaofu's azure dragon body was instantly sliced into two from the middle, and purplish gold blood rained down from the sky. Roar! An earth-shattering roar came from the azure dragon's mouth, shaking the world to the point that it was shaking non-stop. Space was peeled off like a wall, and then it was shaken into powder. The two halves of the azure dragon's body twisted in the void, shattering pieces of space. Blood gushed out from the wound. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's mind was stimulated violently, causing him to break out of his state of comprehension. Law of the soul attack! As he endured the immense pain, waves of formless energy Qi Yu Yang's body invaded his body and primordial spirit. This formless energy was the law of the soul. It was the law of the soul. It was the law of the soul. Was the law of the soul. The law of the soul was. Roar! The azure dragons, azure dragons, azure dragon. The azure dragon, dragons, dragons, inzas in the azure dragon. This all-pervasive force caused the spectators in the distance to retreat again and again. Otherwise, just Du Xiaofu's unconscious roar would be sufficient to annihilate many experts. Kakik! Du Xiaofu, it would have been better if you hadn't left the divine martial world. Even if you came to the 33 heavens, your fate was already sealed. Dongli Qiwang flew towards Du Xiaofu's azure dragon's head. At the same time, he grinned and said, I have to say, you are indeed very powerful. The power behind you is also very strong. The people of the 3,000 boundless worlds are paving the way for you. Back in the Qian Su Jinghua heaven, even when the three great races attacked and even alerted the meditative forgetfulness, they still couldn't kill you. As he spoke, he gathered the terrifying red clouds again and rushed towards Du Xiaofu's azure dragon's body. So what if you are powerful? So what if the power behind you is strong? Today, the Fiend God battlefield will be his burial ground. On the other side, Xinyan also moved. He rushed towards Du Xiaofu's azure dragon's tail. He raised a huge hand and grabbed downwards. He wanted to grab the lower half of Du Xiaofu's body. It's over now! Yu Qing Divine Emperor, quickly dodge! In the distance, many experts saw the two demons continue to attack and became even more nervous. Du Xiaofu took away the only good thing on the island, but these people didn't have the time to care about that. The demons were everyone's real enemy. If even the Yu Qing Divine Emperor couldn't defeat them, then the experts who entered the Fiend God battlefield wouldn't fare any better. With the demon's nature, they definitely wouldn't let the young disciples who entered the Fiend God battlefield go. Divine Emperor! Ting Yuanshan, Meng Dongyang, and Zhang Haoren paled. They hated that they couldn't help Du Xiaofu and stop the two demons from coming closer. However, it was obvious that with their cultivation bases, not to mention that they couldn't make it in time, even if they couldn't stop the two first Sky of Immortal Realm experts. Moreover, each of them had mastered two primitive principles. However, Du Xiaofu's body was broken. They were worried that his life would be in danger. It turns out that you guys were behind the Qian Su Jinghua Heavens incident, Du Xiaofu said ferociously. Until now, he knew that when he was chased by so many beasts in the Qian Su Jinghua Heaven, the three strongest clans had come. However, that wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that the Taisher Demon Dragon clan had sent out a meditative realm expert. It was incomprehensible. Meditative realm experts couldn't come out easily. They didn't need to take action to deal with more than 200 Immortal Realm experts. It was making a big fuss out of nothing. Finally, at this moment, Du Xiaofu came to an understanding. It was definitely Eastern Flame Crimson Phoenix and Qin Yan who'd utilized some sort of trick. You've been scheming to kill me, but the result will be very disappointing. At the same time, Du Xiaofu thought it through and shouted loudly. He suddenly let out a long whistle. The power of principle in his body circulated crazily. The power of the four primitive principles roared, shattering all the soul attacks and expelling them. Then, the two broken parts of his body emitted dazzling light and quickly approached each other. Divine Thunder Cauldrons, kill them! Du Xiaofu shouted loudly. Along with enormous rumbling, the 9 violet lightning profound cauldrons soared through the sky, and they respectively obstructed the Eastern Flame Crimson Phoenix and Qin Yan. It's useless to resist. Give up! The giant that Qin Yan had transformed into spoke coldly, and then he swung his palm and instantly slapped the 2 divine thunder cauldrons flying. No matter how much you resist, it's useless in the end. You can't avoid death today! Dongli Qiwang spoke at the same time. Under the pressure of the red clouds that covered the sky, the 4 divine thunder cauldrons were forcefully suppressed and trembled without end. They were utterly unable to break through the obstruction. Awu! Du Xiaofu paid no attention to the two of them. He activated the spatial laws and executed the ascension move, causing the 2 parts of his body to flash at the same time and appear at the same place. Undying profound body! Du Xiaofu shouted loudly, causing space to tremble violently. After that, under the envelopment of boundless light, the 2 parts of the Azure Dragon's body actually slowly joined together and recovered to its complete form. Such a scene caused the eyelids of Dongli Qiwang and Qin Yan to twitch. The Divine Emperor! That's possible? All the experts in the distance were stunned by this scene. The fact that the 2 parts of the body could be joined together was a slight surprise to all of them. However, no matter how surprised they were, it wasn't impossible for others to accomplish such a thing. Let me see how long you can continue resisting! Dongli Qiwang grunted coldly. He could be considered to have a great understanding of Du Xiaofu's undying profound body, and he was only slightly surprised before he recovered from his shock. Bang! 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 As he spoke, the 4 violet lightning cauldrons were blasted flying by him, and they tore through space and vanished from the enormous black hole. On the other side, after Qin Yan swung his palm twice in succession, he blasted the 5 divine thunder cauldrons away as well. Kill! The pitch-black sword of light in his other hand soared into the sky once more, and it struck down towards Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu swiftly summoned the 8 trigrams in the sky, and the energy of the 4 primordial laws shook and formed a world to resist Qin Yan's attack. At the same time, his Azure Dragon's body retreated swiftly towards the distance, and he didn't go head-on against the 2 of them. The 8 trigrams have melted, and the 4 symbols have been formed. They all belong to Yin and Yang. Yang and Xiaoyang combined to form Yang, Grand Yin and Xiaoyang combined to form Yin. In this way, Yin and Yang are formed. As Du Xiaofu retreated, he sank into comprehension once more. He constantly pondered over these questions in his heart, and he divided the 4 primordial laws into Yin and Yang. People who cultivated all four primordial laws might have appeared in this world before, but there was absolutely no second one in this world. Therefore, Du Xiaofu could only rely on his own comprehension to break through this bottleneck, and he hoped to find an opportunity to step into the immortal realm. Du Xiaofu, die! Dongli Qihuang and Xinyan kept shouting loudly, and a series of ferocious attacks struck down. Du Xiaofu's 8 trigrams in the sky were broken once, and then he used them again. At the same time, the azure dragon's body resisted the aftershocks again, and blood covered his entire body. The 9 purple lightning profound cauldrons appeared once more under his summons, and they moved horizontally to resist wave after wave of ferocious attacks. In the end, Du Xiaofu was practically fighting instinctively, and he used all the methods he could mobilize to defend himself. He didn't fight head-on with Dongli Qihuang and Xinyan at all. His 8 trigrams in the sky were broken time and time again, and the world form was destroyed time and time again. The 9 purple lightning profound cauldrons were blasted away time and time again, and they pierced through the void and went to unknown places. However, under Du Xiaofu's full strength, these methods didn't stop at all, and he dealt with the 2 of them. His azure dragon's body was covered in wounds and bloodstains, and there were even ghastly bone stubble in many places. He was heavily injured. Dongli Qihuang and Xinyan's strength was too terrifying. Under their joint forces, they caused Du Xiaofu's double protection of the undying profound body and azure spirit armor to suffer great injuries. But fortunately, Du Xiaofu only dodged instinctively, and he didn't fight head-on like before. In this way, even though the attacks of the 2 of them were swift and fierce, they were unable to truly annihilate him. Time passed by without end, and Dongli Qihuang and Xinyan didn't seem to be anxious at all. Even though Du Xiaofu was strong, according to the development of the situation before them, it was only a matter of time before they killed him. As far as the 2 of them were concerned, Du Xiaofu only had the ability to parry and didn't have the strength to fight back, and he was completely suppressed by the 2 of them. Divine Emperor! In the distant sky, Meng Dongyang, Teng Yuanshan, and Zhang Haoren started to become anxious. They looked at Du Xiaofu's state, and they became more and more worried in their hearts. 2 Eternal Realm experts that have grasped 2 types of primitive laws. Brother Du's cultivation is too inferior. Xiao Yun was similarly worried, and he spoke as such. Now that the battle had progressed to this stage, they could only watch helplessly. They could no longer interfere. The methods of those 2 devil clansmen were too terrifying, and these true severing realm experts were completely unable to be of much help. They would only be courting death. The combination of time and soul is yin, and the combination of space and matter is yang. As Du Xiaofu's figure flashed, he ceaselessly pondered these questions. Cultivating to the true severing realm was stepping onto a path to pursue the complete primitive laws, whereas in the eternal realm, one had to fuse the complete laws grasped and seek the quintessence of the laws. The quintessence of the laws could be regarded as the supreme truth of the laws in the world. But time, space, matter, and soul could all be divided into the 4 symbols, and the 4 symbols were split from yin and yang. In other words, no matter if it was the 4 great primitive laws or the myriad of things in the world they developed, they could be generalized in terms of yin and yang. If I take a path that others have never taken and directly fuse the 4 great primitive laws together to transform them into yin and yang, then what would happen? This thought arose in Du Xiaofu's mind. The threshold to breaking through to the eternal realm was only so wide, and to transcend with the 4 great primitive laws at the same time was really too difficult. In this way, he'd fuse the laws of time, the laws of soul, the laws of space, and the laws of matter into one to form the Tao of yin and yang. In this way, wouldn't he have the opportunity to develop an even more profound Tao, and utilize this Tao to step foot into the eternal realm? In fact, if this idea were to be placed in the 33 heavens, it would be a paradox. The various laws themselves had not completed the fusion, so if they directly fused with each other at this time, wouldn't it be even more ridiculous? This method was incompatible with the essence of the eternal realm, and it was a completely different concept. However, when Du Xiaofu thought of this, he could not help but become more and more excited. No matter if it succeeds or not, I have to give it a try. He was very excited. Up until now, this was the only way for him to give it a try. Otherwise, under the circumstances that there were no precedents, he would be completely in the dark, and he would be completely unaware of how the four great primitive laws could attain the eternal realm at the same time. At the very least, it was impossible for Dongli Qihuang and Qingyan, who were fighting him, to tell him how they'd attained the eternal realm with two types of primitive laws at the same time. Whoosh! 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 Meanwhile, Dongli Qihuang carried the red clouds that covered the sky and pressed down once more, and he blasted away the 9 divine lightning cauldrons that Du Xiaofu had condensed with great difficulty. Hiss! 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 The sword in Qingyan's hand cut through the sky and slashed down forcefully, directly destroying the 8 trigrams in the sky, and then it struck Du Xiaofu's body. Pff! Amidst the splashing blood, Du Xiaofu relied on this force to retreat again and again. After a fierce battle, the 3 of them had already flown out of the range of the sea of blood and arrived in the sky above a piece of land. Terrifying might surged endlessly, causing the sky to collapse, the earth to sink, and space to collapse. Du Xiaofu, you're really capable of enduring, but this can't change your fate of death. Die, Du Xiaofu! For the sake of my lord, for the sake of the devil race's rise, you can only die! Dongli Qihuang and Qingyan roared fiercely as violent attacks pushed forward layer by layer and descended from the sky. Du Xiaofu ceaselessly coughed up blood, and his azure dragon body had already lost its original form. Many parts of his body had been cut off, and his bones were ghastly white with traces of blood. The 8 trigrams in the sky and the violet lightning cauldrons under his control had completely lost their ferocious might from before, and they were easily shattered by the 2 of them. Let's give it a try! Du Xiaofu's 2 dragon horns had long been smashed, and not a single complete dragon scale could be found on his body. He had lost a small part of his dragon tail, and he looked incomparably miserable from head to toe. He took out the lotus flower that he had previously obtained from his Jianquan bag. This unknown precious medicine had 108 petals, but Du Xiaofu didn't even look at it. He directly took a big bite out of it and swallowed it into his stomach. Chi! Bright rays of light spread out from his body like layers of light cocoons, wrapping his entire azure dragon body within. Waves after waves of bizarre energy began to circulate within his body, impacting his 4 limbs and hundreds of bones. It was vigorous to the extreme, much more vast than any treasure he had used in the past. It was truly like a flood that had opened the floodgates, surging and whistling. Du Xiaofu's meridians emitted a thunderous sound, shaking the entire world to the point of unceasingly trembling. The Divine Emperor has eaten that lotus flower! He can't hold on, those 2 devils are too strong! What should we do? What should we do? Meng Dongyang, Ting Yuanshan, and Zhang Haoran all watched this scene with their eyes wide open. As the battle progressed, the others also came over, but they were more and more worried. Xiaoyun's face was extremely solemn. He wanted to help, but just thinking about it made him feel extremely powerless. If it was an ordinary first sky of Immortal Realm cultivator, the dozens of complete Realm of True Severing Realm cultivators could still fight. But now, only a freak like Du Xiaofu would be able to fight to the death with 2 Immortal Realm elites at the level of Truth Severing. Saintess, should we help or not? If we don't help now, if that Yuqing Divine Emperor really dies, we will be in big trouble. Many of the disciples from the other forces spoke out. As long as Du Xiaofu didn't die, he could barely restrain those 2 Immortal Realm experts. In the Divine Demon battlefield, the Demon Clan was everyone's common enemy. No one wanted to face the overly powerful Demon Clan. No matter how strong those 2 were, they didn't want to give up just like that. If they chose to protect themselves, they would probably face an even more embarrassing end. The saintesses and saintesses didn't answer. They all looked into the distance with serious faces. Their auras began to crazily accumulate as they prepared to attack. In fact, no one knew that at this moment, Du Xiaofu had made a crazy decision. Chapter 2846. A lotus with 108 petals had been bitten off by Du Xiaofu in a single bite. The vigorous energy surged through his limbs and bones like a torrential river, surging and roaring. In just a few breaths of time, the injuries on the azure dragon's body were rapidly healed. Pieces of flesh grew out, and dragon scales appeared in the flickering brilliance. Du Xiaofu's dragon horns grew out, and his aura rose crazily. Soon, he reached his peak. Such a scene caused Dongli Qihuang, Qinyan, and the numerous young disciples in the distance to be extremely shocked. That lotus flower is a treasure. Its effect is too terrifying. He recovered so quickly. This is great. With that lotus flower, the Yuqing Divine Emperor will be able to recover instantly no matter how serious his injuries are. Doesn't that mean he won't die after 100 battles? That's impossible. The lotus flower is a treasure medicine, but there's only one of it. The two demons are too terrifying. It's too difficult for the Yuqing Divine Emperor to win. I'm afraid the outcome will be difficult to change. Many young disciples discussed. They all hoped to see Du Xiaofu win, but it was almost impossible. The lotus flower's effect was to delay time at most. At this point, no matter how many precious medicines you eat, they won't be able to save you. Dongli Qihuang and Qinyan sneered. Then, they attacked Du Xiaofu fiercely. Terrifying attacks fell one after another, wanting to pierce through heaven and earth. On the opposite side, Du Xiaofu's dragon body kept rolling. The 8 trigrams in the void formed again and were destroyed again and again. The 9 divine lightning cauldrons were the same. They streaked across the sky in countless straight trajectories and were sent flying again. The Eastern Flame Crimson Phoenix and Qinyan were extremely terrifying and possessed ferocious strengths. They were the strongest cultivators that Du Xiaofu had faced head-on until now. However, he didn't admit defeat and continued to resist tenaciously. What kind of treasure is this lotus flower? At the same time, Du Xiaofu could not suppress the shock in his heart. The moment he swallowed the lotus, a vigorous energy that was difficult to suppress began to wreak havoc in his body. This energy was different from normal energy. It was pure to the extreme and incomparably vast. In just an instant, Du Xiaofu felt as if a primordial beast was hiding in his body. It carried the terrifying power of a fiend god, capable of moving mountains, burning the sky and boiling the sea, causing the world to explode and the world to sink into oblivion. The power of the 4 great laws within his body was instantly pushed to the limit. Traces of them appeared and were engraved into his body. It was as if every blood vein in his body was formed from low runes. That blood sea gathered the blood of countless creatures. After being filtered and accumulated on that island, the purest energy condensed there. That's why there are so many treasures on that island. The lotus flower growing in that small pond is even more extraordinary. Perhaps it is the strongest thing on that island. In just an instant, Du Xiaofu deduced slightly and figured out the crux of all of this. Although no one knew exactly what the lotus flower was, there was no doubt that it was the greatest benefit of the entire island. The essence energy of the countless living beings that had died in the ancient war was condensed within the lotus flower, and it possessed a terrifying amplification effect towards the various laws. It was precisely because of this that after Du Xiaofu swallowed a small mouthful of it, he felt as if his entire body had been instantly sublimated, and he possessed inexhaustible energy. With this treasure, I can try out my thoughts with all my might. Everything was decided in a single thought. Du Xiaofu stopped thinking about it, and started to mobilize the energy of the laws madly as he started to try out his thoughts. Under his control, the energy of the 4 great primordial laws of time, space, matter, and soul shook wantonly. His entire body was enveloped in divine radiance while large expanses of the markings of the laws danced about and shot out. They carried the aura of the supreme truths of the heavens and the earth, and they were vast and deep. Void 8 trigrams, fuse for me! A loud shout like this resounded from Du Xiaofu's mouth, and accompanying it was a wave of terrifying droning that swept out. The 8 trigrams diagram above him started to revolve rapidly, and transformed into an expanse of shadows. Sky, earth, quake, wind, Ken, Li, Jen, and Dui gradually became blurry, and even the energy of one's soul core was unable to discern them clearly. The energy of the laws flowed endlessly within it, and it surged like tidewater. Swish! Right at this moment, the giant that Qinyan had transformed into held a sword in his hand as he attacked ferociously, and he instantly slashed apart the 8 trigrams diagram that had been condensed before collapsing. Die! Dongli Chihuang's figure stood in midair like a supreme and peerless demon king. With every single move he made, the red clouds that covered the sky pressed down like the veil of the heavens, and it brazenly smashed onto Du Xiaofu's azure dragon body and blasted him to the ground. He directly smashed open an enormous human-shaped pit that was 30 kilometers deep on the hard crimson-black ground, causing dust and dirt to fly into the air. The strengths of these two people were too formidable. Under the circumstances that Du Xiaofu didn't counterattack, they were completely suppressing him. However, Du Xiaofu knew that his counterattack wouldn't be of much use, and if he fought them head-on to the end, the outcome would probably only be death. Since he'd obtained a completely new comprehension, then he might as well go all out and hope to turn the situation around. Within the enormous pit, Du Xiaofu's azure dragon body was severely damaged once more, and blood sprayed. He charged into the sky once more and formed another 8 trigrams diagram. Just a little more. Du Xiaofu's gaze remained unchanged, and his state of mind wasn't affected by the injuries that he'd suffered. After he swallowed a small portion of the lotus flower, the energy that hadn't been completely exhausted had erupted once more, and it was urged by him with all his might. Oem! 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 The 8 trigrams revolved in the air, and it surged through the heavens and the earth, causing its speed to multiply once more. The energy of the 4 primordial laws were arranged and combined, and they represented the Great Yang, Great Yin, Lesser Yang, and Lesser Yin laws intertwined with each other and formed a completely new aura. It was also at the same moment that this aura appeared that Dongli Chihuang and Qingyan's attacks descended once more. However, their attacks suddenly stopped, and it was as if everything in the world had stiffened for an instant. It wasn't just these two people, even the few tens of young experts that were watching the battle from afar felt a wave of daze. It was as if an extremely terrifying pressure had descended at that instant, and it pressed down on the hearts of everyone at the same time, causing them to have the feeling of wanting to crawl on the ground. This sort of feeling was too terrifying. It wasn't ordinary, and it was like the Grand Tao had descended directly, causing them to feel reverence. Every single one of them was instantly drenched in sweat. Fortunately, this sort of feeling only lasted for a short instant, and then it vanished right after that. It was obliterated along with that strange feeling, and it seemed as if it had never appeared in the first place. What's wrong? Was it a misconception just now? Did all of you sense it as well? Looks like it wasn't a misconception. Why do I have that feeling? It's like I'm facing the most supreme existence in the world. It's even more terrifying than the descent of a god. Even a meditative realm expert is unable to possess such terrifying pressure. The disciples of the various hallowed grounds and divine kingdoms spoke, and all of them wiped the sweat off their foreheads as they spoke with bewilderment. They were unable to find the source of it, yet it wasn't a misconception from before, and this caused all of them to feel even more bewildered. Just now, Dongli Chihuang and Qingyan's minds were affected for a moment, and after their attacks descended, they once more struck Du Xiaofu to the point he rolled and bled. However, both of them stopped as well, and they glanced at each other and felt that it was very strange as well. Roar! A resounding dragon roar resounded out, and Du Xiaofu's body swiftly recovered under the powerful energy. The 8 trigrams in the sky continued to transform, and the 4 primordial laws seethed and became entangled with each other, and they wanted to fuse with all their might. Only when the energy of the laws started to fuse would they be able to surpass the truth-severing realm and step foot into the eternal realm. Du Xiaofu felt slightly regretful in his heart. The strange feeling that arose just now allowed him to feel that his guess should be feasible, but it was forcefully interrupted by Dongli Chihuang and Qingyan. Rumble. An enormous circle of light enveloped an area of the sky, and it occupied the world, and it was shocking. On the other hand, Dongli Qiwang and Qingyan weren't afraid in the slightest. No matter how strong Du Xiaofu was, he was only at the true severing realm, and even if it was that strange lotus, he wouldn't be able to take a few bites before it was over. At that time, that kid would be unable to escape death in the end. They quickly tossed the strange feeling that arose just now out of their minds, and they continued to attack. For primordial laws fuse for me. Du Xiaofu shouted loudly and took another bite of the lotus. Mighty energy surged, and the 8 trigrams in the sky changed even faster. But at the same time, Dongli Qiwang and Qingyan charged over again. In order to not be interrupted by these two people, Du Xiaofu started to flash swiftly in the sky, and he quickly traversed an endless distance, and he didn't know where he was in the Fiend God battlefield. He ran blindly, and he wanted to avoid a head-on battle with the two of them before he touched the opportunity to break through. Du Xiaofu, don't try to escape. Chase him. Dongli Qiwang and Qingyan roared. It was impossible for them to let Du Xiaofu leave. This kid was very strange. If they let him escape, it was very likely that the two of them wouldn't be a match for him the next time they met. If that was really the case, then it was too dangerous for the Devil Race's grand plan. In the chase, many disciples of the major factions also followed. They wanted to see the result. A group of people followed behind the three of them from afar, but it didn't take long for them to be left behind. They couldn't keep up, and they watched as the 3 figures disappeared into the distance. What should we do? If the Divine Emperor fights alone, it's hard to say whether he'll live or die. Ting Yuanshan was already as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He wanted to make a move, but he could only lament that he wasn't strong enough. Let's send someone to meet up with Qingyan and the others from the Qingtsang Holy Ground. The rest of us continue to chase. We must find the Divine Emperor. Zhang Haoran was also impatient, but he forced himself to calm down and said to the people around him, Let's do that. Let's follow and see. Brother Du will definitely stop. Xiao Yun nodded, expressing his agreement to his suggestion. Then, under the unanimous agreement of everyone, Meng Dongyang left with a disciple from the Qingtsang Holy Ground to find Yu Qingyan and Yu Qingyao. The people from the other factions did the same. They each sent 1 or 2 people to leave the group. Let's continue to chase. We must find them. Those 2 demons are too strong. If they don't die, we won't be able to move an inch in the celestial demon battlefield. Su Mo Yen waved his hand and led a group of people to fly in the direction where Du Xiaofu and the other 2 had disappeared. That's right. No matter what, the demon race is our biggest enemy. If Yu Qing Divine Emperor can't defeat those 2, the result will be unimaginable. Qi Yuanlin said as he followed Su Mo Yan's footsteps and flew into the sky. Let's go! Lian Kaiyan shouted. Her body was light, but her speed was incomparably fast. She disappeared in the blink of an eye. The disciples of the various factions understood clearly what the appearance of the immortal realm demon race meant to the young disciples who had entered the celestial demon battlefield. If it was an ordinary first sky of immortal realm demon, they could still deal with it if they worked together. However, the 2 people called Dongli Qiwang and Qingyan were much stronger than ordinary immortal realm demons. If they killed Du Xiaofu, Yu Qing Divine Emperor, they wouldn't let the others go easily. No one knew how many immortal realm demons there were in the celestial demon battlefield. If a large number of them were summoned, millions of young disciples wouldn't be able to survive. No one was willing to see such an outcome. The group quickly flew through the sky, trying their best to find the traces of Du Xiaofu and the other 2. Along the way, they saw pieces of land that had been overturned. In some places, the void hadn't healed yet. There were also billowing energy fluctuations that were caused by the battle between the 3 people. The more they searched, the more anxious they became. Compared to the speed of Du Xiaofu, Dongli Qiwang, and Qingyan, the experts were like snails. They were too slow. Gradually, uneasiness spread among the crowd. Everyone hoped to find the 3 people as soon as possible. However, the celestial demon battlefield was vast and boundless. As the 3 people fought fiercely, it was hard for them to catch up even if they tried to find the traces. I hope the Divine Emperor can hold on until the end, Zhang Haoren said softly to Ting Yuanshan. All of them didn't give up and moved forward swiftly. Until a certain moment in time, the hearts of all the experts that were flashing swiftly in the sky shook abruptly. Suddenly. Subsequently, a terrifying pressure descended just like before, and it brazenly pressed down onto every single one of them. At the same time, a ferocious energy fluctuation spread over, and then a few tens of perfection stage true Severance Realm experts fell from the sky like dumplings and smashed fiercely onto the ground, causing dust to cover the sky. At this moment, every single one of them felt the vital blood within their bodies roil without end. After they smashed onto the ground, they weren't even able to turn around, and they just lay there in disorder, unable to move. All of this had occurred too suddenly, and it was unexpected to them, causing them to be unable to react in the slightest. At this moment, they felt an inexplicable sense of fear. It was pervasive and unfathomable. What happened? What happened? Some experts howled in their hearts, and they wanted to find the source of this terrifying pressure. An unforeseen event. An absolutely huge unforeseen event has occurred in the celestial demon battlefield. Some people thought like this, and the terror in their hearts rose rapidly. These thoughts only lasted for an instant, and in the next instant, a resplendent light suddenly appeared on the horizon. Under everyone's gaze, an incomparably huge circle of light appeared in the sky and rapidly spread out. Within the circle of light, there was a mysterious energy circulating, releasing a strange light, causing people to be unable to distinguish what kind of energy it was. This is... Many experts were panicking, and they completely didn't know what was going on. Not only these people, but as the circle of light continued to expand, it didn't take long for it to cover a small portion of the celestial demon battlefield. Of the many young experts who had entered here, at least hundreds of thousands of them were covered by the circle of light at this moment. All of them fell from the sky and were fiercely pressed onto the ground, unable to move. They felt a terrifying aura, and this aura came from the depths of their souls, from the powerlessness of their physical bodies, and from everything. However, everyone was unable to resist at all, and this made them feel despair. They completely didn't know what was going on, but they could conclude that something terrifying must have happened. Could it be related to the Divine Emperor and those two demons? Fortunately, Zhang Haoren, Ting Yuanshan, and the others were still able to think. They'd thought of this, but they were extremely uncertain. Even though the Divine Emperor and those two demons were formidable, they shouldn't be formidable to such an extent. The strange aura that appeared during their battle earlier was similar to this. Perhaps. Xiaoyun thought up to this point, and he couldn't help but be shocked. Even though he wasn't sure if it was related to Du Xiaofu's group of three, he still couldn't help but think in this direction. At this moment, there were two figures in the distant sky that were also enveloped by this light circle. These two people were precisely Dongli Qiwang and Qin Yan, who were pursuing Du Xiaofu. However, they did not continue to chase after Du Xiaofu at this time. Instead, they stepped on the ground and staggered as they fled. Amazing! Amazing! Du Xiaofu is too terrifying! He's too terrifying! Qin Yan's expression had changed since a long time ago, and his aura was weak to the extreme while his speed wasn't even 10% of his normal speed. He tried his best to resist the pressure in the sky with the intention of charging out of the area covered by the circle of light and getting further away from Du Xiaofu. The energy of the Grand Tao. This is the energy of the Grand Tao. What ability does Du Xiaofu possess to actually be able to come into contact with a trace of the energy of the Grand Tao at the true severing realm? Dongli Qihuang's face was ghastly pale to the extreme while his lips trembled without end, and he couldn't speak clearly. He was completely unable to accept what had happened today, and his mind was filled with chaos. He was utterly unable to understand. Earlier, they'd exhausted an extremely long time to pursue Du Xiaofu, and they'd originally thought that kid would be unable to resist until the end no matter what. But never had they expected that after Qin Yan swallowed the entire lotus, he'd actually developed the energy of the 8 trigrams to a completely different level. It was precisely because of this that the scene before their eyes had appeared. Under the cover of that terrifying energy, Dong Li Qiwang and Qingyan felt that they might be crushed to death at any moment, and they didn't even have the slightest bit of luck. As ancient experts that had survived numerous reincarnations until now, they'd instantly discerned how terrifying the energy Du Xiaofu condensed was. It represented the supreme grand Tao in the heavens and the earth, and it was the energy of the ruler of everything in the world. Chapter 2847. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. How is this possible? Xinyan's words were incoherent. Sweat rolled down his entire body like a light rain, soaking his robes. What was the great Tao? Very few people in this world could explain it clearly. Everyone only knew that it was a supreme existence, the foundation of everything in this world. The four great primitive laws were all born from the great Tao. However, the Eastern Flame, Crimson Phoenix, and Qingyan were different. They were extraordinary experts that had survived from the ancient times until now. Even though they'd lost their extraordinary cultivations, their discerning gazes were still peerless and unparalleled. They were able to sense that the aura Du Xiaofu emanated was indeed the aura of the Grand Tao. True severing perfection realm, the next step should be the immortal realm. How can this be? Dongli Qiwang felt like he was about to go crazy. He did not dare to believe everything that happened to Du Xiaofu no matter what. Living beings cultivated, true severing realm pursued complete laws. It was like collecting the derivative states of the four great primitive laws one by one, fusing them after reaching the immortal realm. To put it bluntly, what the immortal realm pursued was the origin power of laws, not the power of the great Tao. No matter who it was, only by stepping into the meditative realm could one begin to touch a trace of the great Tao, and then go through the baptism and sublimation of the three dangerous and terrifying realms of forgetting heaven and earth, forgetting oneself, and looking through reincarnation. Only then could one truly grasp the origin of the great Tao and finally stand in a supreme place. However, Du Xiaofu seemed to have taken a different path from ordinary people. Under the fusion of the four great primitive laws, it actually directly gave birth to Tao rhymes. This was too terrifying. Dongli Qiwang and Xinyan were unable to accept such an outcome. Huff, huff, huff! Under the envelopment of that huge light circle, the two fled for their lives, wanting to leave this area. That suppression was too terrifying. It directly suppressed their bodies, causing the two to suffer heavy injuries. Fortunately, the Tao rhymes that Du Xiaofu produced at this time were still very weak. With their immortal realm cultivation, they could still barely move. It was just that their speed was severely restricted. After fleeing for a very long time, the two of them had only covered a distance of several 100,000 li. They still had a very long way to go if they wanted to truly escape. Besides Dongli Qiwang and Qingyan, every single one of the hundreds of thousands of experts that had entered the Fiend God battle domain and were covered by the enormous circle of light felt threatened as well. No one knew what was going on. They were pressed to the ground as if they were carrying a heavy mountain, unable to move. Other than being able to think, they couldn't even communicate with each other. Their hearts were filled with shock and despair. Under such circumstances, the area was strangely quiet for a moment. Only the huge circle of light was still vibrating incessantly. In the center of the circle of light, Du Xiaofu had already returned to his human form. His eyes were slightly closed, and his body had recovered completely. A strange rhythm emanated from his body, rising into the sky and forming a chaotic vortex. Grotesque and variegated scenes filled the air, surrounded by a huge circle of light, releasing an indescribable charm. If I want to charge through the true severing realm and step foot into the eternal realm, then I must start fusing with a portion of the energy of the laws. However, I've grasped four great primordial laws at the same time, so it's too difficult to accomplish this. In this way, I'll allow the four great primordial laws to interweave and fuse with each other before breaking through in one go. Du Xiaofu thought like this in his heart amidst these changes. His entire body was immersed in an indescribable state. At this moment, He felt that he was in harmony with the most profound existence in the world, and it seemed to have surpassed the scope of the laws. Even though this sort of transcendence was very little in terms of quantity, and it was far from being sufficient to compare with experts that had grasped a deep quintessence of the laws. However, this was a qualitative difference, and it possessed an absolute suppressive effect towards ordinary experts. He didn't know what sort of path he'd taken, but he knew that this path ought to be passable. Du Xiaofu's state continued for a very long time, and almost a year of time passed by swiftly just like that. During this year, Dongli Qiwang and Qin Yan had always been fleeing under the terrifying suppression, but they still hadn't escaped the range of the halo's envelopment. The situation of the other hundreds of thousands of young experts was similar. They were unable to break free from the suppressive force on their bodies and were suppressed to the ground, unable to move at all. There were even more experts in the Fiend God battle realm who were originally in other regions, but when they rushed to the vicinity of the halo out of curiosity, all of them were suppressed without exception and suffered the same fate as the other experts. In the end, everyone's state of mind calmed down, and they no longer panicked because of that strange power that suddenly appeared. They discovered that even though this power was extremely terrifying and powerful, it didn't truly harm them. It was just that the pressure was too strong, and these people at the truth-severing realm like them didn't have the slightest ability to resist. On a certain day, a heavenly sound suddenly reverberated, resounding throughout the entire Fiend God battle realm. All the experts who heard this heavenly sound instantly seemed to have received some kind of baptism, and their spirits rose 100-fold. Following this, the enormous halo in the sky started to shrink, continuously shrinking towards the center. "I can move! That's great! I can move, I'm free! Saint Sun, how are you?" At the same time, when the terrifying halo shrank and everyone left its range, all the experts felt that they could move again. Shouts of excitement rang out one after another, filled with an indescribable emotion. In the past year, everyone seemed to have experienced the most terrifying thing in their lives, and this happiness had come too suddenly. After many experts asked each other, and found that everyone was fine, they finally relaxed. "Something big must have happened. I wonder if it's really related to Brother Du," Xiaoyun said to the disciples of the Qing-Tsang Holy Land, Zhang Haoren, Ting Yuanshan, and the others as he looked in the direction the halo had retreated. "I've never heard of such a terrifying thing before." Zhang Haoren's expression was dignified. He didn't know if the two demon race experts were fighting the God Emperor or not. "Such a huge commotion, I'm afraid it has alarmed the entire Fiend God battle realm. We need to go and take a look and see what's going on." The holy son of the Huanchu Holy Land, Su Mo Yen, said softly. "There is indeed a need to investigate. There hasn't been such a thing in the 33 heavens." The holy son of the True Yen Holy Land, Shi Yuanlin, nodded and said, "No one can say for sure if something unexpected will happen, so there's no need for others to go. The holy sons and holy daughters of the various holy lands should go." Lien Kaiyun of the Mirror Moon Holy Land nodded in agreement. After many experts discussed, they felt that Lien Kaiyun's words were reasonable. Immediately after, the holy sons and holy daughters of the various holy lands began to move together. A few divine kingdoms also sent their experts and flew towards the halo. Because this matter involved Du Xiaofu, Zhang Haoren and Ting Yuanshan of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom didn't stay behind and went with Xiaoyun. As for the others, they went to find their own teams under the instructions of their leaders. "The halo is retreating very quickly, we need to hurry." About 20 or so powerhouses moved forward at high speed, chasing in the direction of the circle of light. They didn't delay at all. Although they felt that something unexpected might happen at any time, they all wanted to see with their own eyes what had happened there. This could be considered a big deal for the entire transcendent Changrong heaven, or even the entire 33 heavens. At the very least, in the outside world, they had never heard of anyone who could suppress so many experts at the complete stage of truth severing to the point that they couldn't move at all. If the complete stage of truth severing really appeared in the Fiend God battlefield, it would be even more extraordinary. While many experts were rushing in the direction the halo had retreated, On the other side, Dongli Qihuang and Qin Yan stopped running. After losing the terrifying suppression, they flew into the air and couldn't hide the deep shock on their faces. He actually evolved a trace of the great Tao. This Du Xiaofu is really so abnormal. Dongli Qihuang gritted his teeth, and his expression was extremely ferocious as he spoke. He couldn't imagine that this kid was still doing things that ordinary people couldn't do in the divine martial world like back then. At the complete stage of truth severing, grasping the four primordial laws was already shocking enough. Thinking back to the ancient times when the world had just been created, the laws hadn't been set, and life was extraordinary. Under the background of that grand era, only an extremely small number of people could do this. What was even more terrifying was that he actually touched a trace of the great Tao at the true severing stage. Needless to say, this was truly too terrifying. Not to mention the current era, even in the ancient times, this was something unimaginable. Perhaps only the few most powerful existences in the first batch of experts after the chaos was split open had such ability, such as the first supreme expert after the creation of the world, Heavenly Venerable Absolute. He can't be left alive! This kid can't be left alive! Qin Yan's lips trembled as he spoke with a trembling voice, and killing intent shot out from his eyes. Du Xiaofu's growth was too fast and too abnormal, completely exceeding the level of an ordinary person. Looking through the entire 33 heavens, there wasn't a second monster like this. This made him feel enormous pressure. If Du Xiaofu didn't die, then it was very likely that Du Xiaofu would cause an enormous obstruction to the rise of the devil race in the future. That kid was too terrifying. At this moment, Qin Yan's killing intent towards Du Xiaofu blazed even more fiercely. He must die! The two of us are unable to kill him, but we absolutely can't allow him to leave this ancient battlefield alive. Dongli Qihuang's gaze was ferocious, and it contained boundless killing intent. If Du Xiaofu didn't die, he would be the biggest threat to them. Looks like we can only utilize our final move. Qin Yan pondered deeply for a short while before he spoke fiercely. Their most important objective after entering the Fiend God battle domain was to kill Du Xiaofu. As for their failure this time, it was absolutely an enormous mishap. However, they still had some trump cards they could utilize in this ancient battlefield. Do we really have to do this? When he heard Qin Yan, Dongli Qihuang's handsome brows frowned, and he said with slight worry, "The scene would probably be too great. It might alarm the Supreme Changrong Heaven and even the numerous experts of the 33 heavens to spy on us. At that time, it would have an even greater impact on the grand plans of our devil race. If some old seniors that have been in hibernation for countless years come into being, then the situation would be even more uncontrollable." He had hidden worries in his heart, and he felt that such a scene was serious just thinking about it. The devil race hadn't truly risen yet, so it wouldn't be a good thing if it aroused the vigilance of the entire 33 heavens. Du Xiaofu is the most serious threat to our devil race. No matter what, we must eliminate him before he truly matures. Otherwise, even if our devil race rules the entire 33 heavens, his existence would always be like a sharp blade hanging above our heads, and it would cause us to be unable to eat or sleep in peace. Thus, no matter what price we have to pay, we must kill him. Qin Yan spoke with an extremely gloomy tone, and he continued. As for arousing the vigilance of those old freaks that have been in hibernation for countless years, we can't care about that anymore. The important matter at hand is to kill Du Xiaofu. His words were urgent, and he felt that the situation was extremely serious, and he had the intention to kill Du Xiaofu. Dongli Qihuang was silent for a long time, and then he nodded and said, "That's fine as well. The devil race has to come to the surface in the end, and there are some things that we have to face sooner or later. But on my lord's side..." As he spoke, he stopped, and his brows that had just eased up knit together once more. "My lord's side should be fine. Since we've already done it, then we have to finish it to the end, and we can't give up halfway. No matter what, Du Xiaofu must die." Qin Yan spoke in a powerful and resonant voice. "Moreover, I presume my lord is already aware of everything that we've done in Qiansu Jinghua Heaven. Out of consideration for his friendship with Du Xiaofu in the past, he wasn't willing to make a move himself, but he didn't speak out to stop us from killing Du Xiaofu, so he's probably tacitly approved of it. Then let's do that. Dong Li Qiwang thought for a short moment, and then his gaze became firm. Perhaps Chen Yan was right. Their actions shouldn't be able to escape his eyes. Since he didn't reprimand them, then it should be Black's tacit approval of all of this. At this moment, Du Xiaofu is breaking through to that legendary realm. Once he completes it, his strength will become even more formidable, and he can't be estimated by an ordinary immortal realm expert. He'll be even more difficult to deal with. Chen Yan spoke again, and he said, "We have to make the best use of our time and take action. We absolutely can't allow Du Xiaofu to successfully take that step." His gaze flickered, and a solemn expression arose in his eyes. "Let's go." Dong Li Qiwang didn't waste any more time. He waved his hand, and let me leave. Chen Yan's figure also transformed, and he disappeared from where he stood. On the other side, the strongest disciples of the various superpowers were all heading towards the direction where the huge light circle retreated. Their speed was extremely fast, and they were all moving at full speed. Even so, it took them more than half a year to get close to the final destination. At this moment, the light circle had already shrunk to a very small state, and it only covered a radius of a few feet. Yu Qing Divine Emperor, it's really him. Under everyone's gaze, below the light circle, a purple-robed young man stood in the air, and he seemed to be immersed in an extremely mysterious state. As for that circle of light, it looked like a divine ring floating in the air, and it emanated a vast and profound aura. That terrifying commotion came from his body. What exactly is he going through? Everyone was shocked. Even though many of them had guessed earlier that the commotion might have had something to do with the young Yu Qing Divine Emperor, no one could be sure. At this moment, seeing him standing there like a god, many experts couldn't help but be shocked and shocked. That mysterious aura left a lingering fear in their hearts. Almost a year of being suppressed and unable to move was something that no one could forget. What a terrifying aura. What kind of state is the Divine Emperor in? Looking at Du Xiaofu and the light circle from afar, Zhang Haoren said in a daze. Although everyone was no longer within the circle of light, they could still feel the terrifying aura emanating from it from afar, causing them to feel an inexplicable sense of awe and the desire to prostrate themselves in worship. This aura. Just as everyone was deeply shocked, Su Mo Yen, Qi Yuanlin, and Lian Kaiyun looked at each other, and seemed to feel something at the same time. The shock in their eyes became several times stronger. This is the aura of the Great Way. Su Mo Yen was shocked for a long while before he muttered to himself. In his perception, the strange and indescribable aura coming from the divine ring above Du Xiaofu's head was similar to the aura of some people he had come into contact with. That's right. I was fortunate enough to see one of the ancestors of the True Yen Holy Grounds appear. The aura on his body is very similar to that of the Yu Qing Divine Emperor. Qi Yuanlin also opened his mouth, his voice filled with deep shock. After he finished speaking, he looked at Su Mo Yen and Lian Kaiyun. The two of them nodded at the same time, agreeing with what he had said. When the rest of the people heard it, they were all shocked. Their throats couldn't help but move and they felt their lips go dry. The Great Way. Just these two words alone represented the highest of all. The strongest realm in the 33 heavens was meditative forgetfulness, which was the realm of the Great Way. Only by reaching that realm could one come into contact with the Great Way. However, right in front of them, the young Divine Emperor of Yu Qing Holy Kingdom had done it. This caused everyone to be shocked to the extreme. How is this possible? How is this possible? Xiao Yun's face was incomparably shocked, and his words were a mess. Of course, he knew the concept of the Great Way. However, he was still too far away from that realm. Du Xiaofu was originally not that far away from him. However, why was he suddenly able to come into contact with the Great Way? This was incomprehensible. Could it be because of the 4 great primitive laws? Someone thought of this and felt that the most special thing about Du Xiaofu was that he had mastered the 4 great primitive laws. Just this point alone was enough to make all the geniuses in the 33 heavens pale in comparison. I thought of a legendary realm, Su Emoyen said. Chapter 2848. As Su Emoyen spoke, he swallowed hard. When the crowd heard what Su Emo had said, they turned to look at him. They wanted to hear what Su Emo had in mind. According to the ancient records of my Huan Chu Holy Land, in the age of Yin and Yang, when the heavens and earth were first created, the beings born were incomparably powerful. At that time, order had not yet appeared and the laws had not yet been set. The realms that beings cultivated were not completely the same as the 9 realms later on. There were some discrepancies. Su Emoyan's eyes became serious as he slowly said, "It is said that in the beginning, there were no immortal and meditative realms. There were only one realm called Virtual Path. But later on, as more and more beings were born, the Virtual Path realm became increasingly difficult to achieve. Thus, it split into the true severing and immortal realms, which were passed down through the ages and never changed." Hearing his words, many of the experts present were shocked once again. None of them had heard of this before. However, with the Huan Chu Holy Land's background and the fact that it had been passed down through the ages, these records shouldn't be fake. Moreover, there was no need for that. The immortal and meditative realms are the same realm called Virtual Path. I'm afraid that only the most powerful existences can reach this realm. Everyone had the same thought in their hearts. They yearned for the vast and obscure era of Yin and Yang. Since the immortal and meditative realms were 2 realms later on, those that could step into the Virtual Path were definitely a group of terrifying existences. No one in the world could compare to them. And it was precisely because those who came later were unable to reach it that the realms were split apart. Virtual Path, what kind of realm is that? Xiaoyun raised his eyebrows and asked Su Emoyen. Everyone's ears perked up as they heard this question. Their eyes shined as they looked at Su Emoyen, wanting to hear what he had to say. The Virtual Path realm is a legendary realm. We all know that in the true severing realm, one needs to grasp the complete form of the original laws. And in the immortal realm, one needs to fuse these laws together and grasp the origin of the laws. In ancient times, the first beings that were born were terrifyingly powerful. At that time, the laws of the heavens and earth were not complete. As the laws were explored and established, it was much easier to grasp them. Thus, although there aren't many people who have the 4 original laws, there are still quite a few. As Su Emoyen spoke, he looked at the purple-robed youth in the distance. After a long time, he continued, "In the Virtual Path realm, once a being grasped all the 4 original laws, there is no need to fuse them together like in the immortal realm, and one can directly trace the origin and traces of the laws." Later on, the laws of heaven and earth were completely revealed, and the order was stabilized layer by layer. The cultivation of living beings was also greatly affected, and they no longer had such unique conditions. Everyone was bound by the power of heaven and earth, and their cultivation had to progress step by step. No one could reach the Virtual Path realm anymore, and that was why it was split up. Thus, heaven and earth were separated. As Su Emoyen spoke, the crowd was shocked. That was to say, in the ancient times, the beings that were born in the process of establishing the laws of the heavens and earth could easily grasp the 4 original laws. Not everyone could do this, but there were definitely many who could. What were the 4 original laws? They were things that were created by the Great Path. They represented the highest existence in the heavens and earth. In other words, after a true severing realm cultivator grasped the 4 original laws, he could directly trace the path of the Great Path and explore the most profound laws of the heavens and earth. Then, Yu Qing Divine Emperor! An expert exclaimed in shock. He didn't finish his sentence, but everyone understood what he meant. Could the purple-robed youth have really reached the legendary, Virtual Path realm? If that was the case, it was too terrifying. Only immortal realm experts could trace the origin of the Great Path. Did he have the ability to do so now? If that was the case, how strong would he be after breaking through? This Yuqing Divine Emperor is too terrifying. If he successfully breaks through, won't he become one of the top experts in the 33 heavens? Someone said with a strong sense of shock. I don't know much about the virtual path realm. The ancient records of Huanchu Holy Lands are also not detailed. However, one thing is for sure. The virtual path realm cannot be measured by the immortal realm and the meditative realm. According to my estimates, after Yu Qing Divine Emperor breaks through, he will definitely be stronger than ordinary immortal realm experts. However, he will still be far from the meditative realm. However, if he breaks through to the virtual path realm, he will definitely be stronger than meditative realm experts. Su Mo Yen pursed his lips and said. He continued to explain to the people around him. What he said were all guesses in his heart, and had nothing to do with the ancient records. Following his explanation, everyone agreed with him and became clearer about the virtual path realm. This legendary realm had a long span of time. The 4 original laws constantly intertwined and fused together. Could it be that it was far stronger than the fusion of the immortal realm? If Du Xiaofu really broke through, he would definitely be much stronger than ordinary immortal realm experts. He couldn't be judged by common sense. The 33 heavens have existed for countless years. Aside from those ancient experts, I have never heard of anyone transcending with the 4 original laws. This Du Xiaofu will definitely surpass countless ancestors in the future, and stand at the peak of the 33 heavens. Many people sighed. They couldn't suppress the waves of shock in their hearts. Today, we are about to witness a historical moment. Someone muttered, and the gaze he shot at the violet-robed young man was filled with boundless reverence and worship. They were the strongest disciples from the various superpowers. They were all arrogant and thought that they were extraordinary. However, today, under the brilliance of the young Yu Qing Divine Emperor, they had no choice but to put down the pride in their hearts. With him sitting on the throne, Yu Qing Divine Kingdom won't be able to rise. How can the various superpowers in the kingdom not rise? Zhang Haoren and Ting Yuanshan were shocked beyond words. They believed that as long as Du Xiaofu grew up, Yu Qing Divine Kingdom would definitely be able to stand at the peak of the 33 heavens. They wouldn't be any worse than those ancient superpowers. The 33 heavens are going to boil over. Xiaoyun said numbly as he stared in Du Xiaofu's direction. It was as if his entire body was numb. Everyone looked at the purple-robed youth in the distance with shining eyes. They wanted to witness the birth of a miracle. After all, this was definitely something that had never happened before. It would definitely cause all the living beings in the 33 heavens to go crazy. In their line of sight, the divine ring above Du Xiaofu's head continued to spin and release a terrifying aura. There, the laws intertwined, the rhythm of the Tao rose, all things were evolving. An order was being weaved. This scene was related to everything in the world, but it also surpassed everything in the world. This scene continued for a very long time without dissipating. Everyone stood in the distance and quietly watched. At this time, no one was in the mood to explore the Fiend God battlefield. The origin of the laws is evolving. About a year later, Xiaoyun said softly. He could feel that the origin of the laws was being formed in the divine ring above Du Xiaofu. Although it wasn't complete, it was indeed evolving. The power of the Great Path is also rising. Qi Yuanlin swallowed his saliva and said softly. As a true severing realm expert and having seen the aura of the Elder of the Meditative Realm, he could naturally feel the rhythm of the Great Path flowing in the divine ring. It was something that transcended the mortal world. I understand now. I see. Su Mo Yen suddenly cried out in excitement, almost exclaiming in surprise. Everyone looked at him again, wanting to hear what he had to say. I see. The 4 great primordial laws were originally derived from the Great Path. The immortal realm experts search for the origin of the laws and find the traces of the Great Path. This is a process. However, Yu Qing Emperor grasped the 4 great primordial laws at the same time. Thus, when the power of the laws merged, it produced a trace of rhythm. Su Mo Yen exclaimed excitedly. Indeed. Then, is he comprehending the origin of the laws and the Great Path at the same time? One of the experts was puzzled and voiced his doubts. No. Su Mo Yen immediately denied and said, "For ordinary experts, the immortal realm and the meditative realm are two different processes. It's like following the vine to find the melon. First, they grasp the origin of the laws, then they search for the origin of the great path. However, Yu Qing Emperor is different. He merged the four great primordial laws together. In this process, the rhythm of the great path is naturally produced. He doesn't need to search for the great path. In other words, as long as he finds the origin of the laws, he is only one step away from the true great path." When he said this, everyone understood once again. This meant that what others needed two processes to complete, Du Xiaofu only needed one process. The origin of the laws was derived from the great path. When the four great primordial laws gathered towards the origin of the laws, the rhythm of the great path would naturally be produced. In the end, when the origin of the laws reached perfection, the rhythm of the great path would also reach its peak. In such a realm, the distance to the true great path was indeed within reach. When they thought of this, everyone was envious. They felt their blood boil because of Du Xiaofu's situation. The great path was the supreme existence that everyone yearned for. At this moment, everyone's thoughts couldn't be described with just the word envious. However, everyone knew that they couldn't be envious. It wasn't just them. Since the beginning of time, countless living beings in the 33 heavens couldn't be envious. That was a person's fortune, and it required extremely abnormal comprehension ability and unimaginably abundant opportunities. Only with such attainments would one be able to achieve such a situation. Look, there's a change. At this moment, someone suddenly shouted and pointed excitedly at the purple-robed figure in the distance. There was no need for him to remind them. Many experts had already discovered the new situation over there at the first moment. They saw that above Du Xiaofu, the divine ring was becoming increasingly bright. It was like a blazing sun in the sky, illuminating everything for tens of thousands of miles. The entire divinity demon battle realm was illuminated. From the dark red earth, liquid seeped out, emitting a scarlet light. Then, the aura of the divine ring began to boil, pulsing without end. Chila, suddenly the skies were torn apart by a bright light. It was as fast as thunder, striking straight at Du Xiaofu. Boom! At the same time, another loud explosion rang out. It was like a heavenly drum being struck. The muffled sound reverberated in all directions, causing the heavens to shatter and the earth to sink. One. Then, a terrifying buzzing sound appeared out of thin air. It was like a wheel driven by a supreme god was crushing through the void, carrying with it a shocking strength. At this moment, all the experts felt as if their hearts were suddenly clenched tightly by a large hand. They found it difficult to breathe, as if they were about to stop breathing. Under their gazes, ripples of various shapes and sizes appeared around Du Xiaofu and wrapped around his body. They looked like long whips dancing in the air as they lashed out at Du Xiaofu. The terrifying bolt of lightning also slashed down, and was about to hit Du Xiaofu. Heaven Punishment Tao Pattern! This is the Heaven Punishment Tao Pattern! Retreat! Quick! Su Mo Yan's face changed drastically when he saw this scene. He then shouted crazily, his voice reverberating through the sky. His shout hadn't finished resounding through the air when his entire body had already shot out explosively, and he fled extremely swiftly towards the rear like a terrified stray dog. Many people did not know what was going on, but they did not dare to hesitate, and immediately followed him. As the strongest disciple of the strongest force in Changrong Heaven, Su Mo Yan's knowledge and experience exceeded many people. No one dared to disregard his words. Holy Sun, what is the Heaven Punishment Tao Pattern? Zhang Haoren felt uneasy, but he could not help but ask Xiaoyun. He came from a powerful force in Yuqing Holy Kingdom, but he had never heard of the Heaven Punishment Tao Pattern. Xiaoyun's face was extremely pale. As he fled with all his might, he licked his lips and said in a trembling voice, Legend has it that when one is in the meditative realm, every time one breaks through a realm, there will be a calamity. This calamity is formed by the Heaven Punishment Tao Pattern. It is said that it carries the power of the Great Path. As he fled, he explained to Zhang Haoren and Ting Yuanshan beside him. The Great Path is the most supreme existence in this world. That kind of power is not allowed to come into contact with, it is a taboo. However, at the end of the path of cultivation, it is to pursue the highest and will definitely come into contact with the Great Path. It is also because of this that in the meditative realm, not only does one have to endure the most difficult cultivation of this realm, one also has to resist the heaven punishment Tao pattern when breaking through. Only by resisting it can one reach a higher level. Although Brother Du is not in the meditative realm right now, his phantom Tao realm should be even more heaven-defying. That is why the Great Path is going to use the heaven punishment Tao pattern to kill him. A large area around him will become a forbidden area. If we continue to stay there, I'm afraid we will die without even a bone left. Xiaoyun spoke very quickly and told the two of them everything he knew. Ting Yuanshan and Zhang Haoren became extremely nervous when they heard his words. They unconsciously looked back, but they were pulled away by Xiaoyun. His speed increased again. The heaven punishment Tao pattern touched upon the taboo. The Great Path will kill itself, Ting Yuanshan muttered. He was deeply worried for Du Xiaofu. Just hearing what Xiaoyun said caused him to feel a chill run down his spine, and boundless shock swiftly arose in his heart. The Great Path was a supreme existence. It could not be touched or profaned. If one wanted to break through, one had to endure the heaven punishment Tao pattern. Only by resisting it could one have a stable footing. Emperor Deity, you must resist it. Zhang Haoren resisted the urge to turn around and look. He kept his head down and fled. Since it was the heaven punishment Tao pattern, only those who had reached the meditative realm or the legendary phantom Tao realm would have it. It was absolutely terrifying. It was possible that even those who had reached the meditative realm or the phantom Tao realm would not be able to resist it. If Du Xiaofu could not resist it, then the result would be, Brother Du, you can only rely on yourself for this. Xiaoyun smiled bitterly as he silently muttered in his heart. With his strength, there was nothing he could do. He could only pray silently. Everyone ran away extremely quickly and did not look back. Along the way, Su Mo Yen, Qi Yuanlin, Lian Kaiyun, Xiaoyun and the others let out long cries to warn the other experts along the way. They wanted everyone to quickly run away to avoid being implicated and dying. For the time being, the entire divine demon battlefield was in chaos. Everyone was running away crazily as they wanted to get as far away from Du Xiaofu as possible. However, in such a situation, there was a group of people who were different from the others. They did not run away but rushed toward Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu is breaking through. If he can resist the forbidden heaven punishment, we won't be able to stop him. In front of this group of people, Xinyan was the first to move. His body was releasing a fierce aura as his eyes kept flashing. Behind him, strange creatures followed. There were no less than 300 of them. Most of these creatures were humanoid. Some of them were covered in spikes, some were covered in scales, and some were burly with 2 horns on their heads. They were the characteristics of the demon clan. The most important thing was that these 300 demon clan experts all had powerful auras. The weakest one was at the first sky of Immortal Realm. It was a terrifying team. Quick! Speed up! We must stop him before he can resist it. We must seize the chance to kill him while he's resisting the heaven punishment. Dongli Qiwang spoke in a low voice, shouting at the large group of people behind him. No matter how many of us die, we must stop him from breaking through. Xinyan gritted his teeth fiercely, and he'd already executed his speed to its limits. He didn't dare to delay. He only wanted to lead the experts behind him to attack. Even if he had to sacrifice a lot of lives, he wouldn't hesitate. They only wanted one result, which was to kill Du Xiaofu. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.